Simple girl sings in bars for chunk. A billionaire music producer was hypnotized and offers her $1 million contract. But the first clause demands something unthinkable. Hello, viewer. Thanks for joining us. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. Lena Morgan stood on a small corner stage inside the Midnight Roar, a dimly lit bar just off 6th Street in Austin, Texas. She was 24, with dark, curly hair that cascaded over her shoulders, framing a face lit by an intense, yet gentle gaze. A single spotlight flickered above her as she gripped her old acoustic guitar, her voice weaving through the smoky air. That night, only a handful of patrons bothered to look up from their drinks. Still, Lena sang with all the conviction in her heart, as if a larger crowd might appear at any moment. There was a raspy edge in her tone, a raw honesty that set her apart from the usual cover singers who drifted through Austin's vibrant music scene. Her lyrics spoke of city lights and bruised dreams, merging the heartache of late nights with the fleeting promise of hope. In her mind, she was both defiant and vulnerable, longing for the day her words might finally resonate beyond the walls of a run-down bar. When the final chord hung in the air, the applause was polite but brief. The bar's owner, Vince, emerged from behind the counter to place a few dollar bills in Lena's tip jar. He offered her a nod that felt more like a formality than genuine praise. "Thanks for your set," he muttered. "I'll see you next Wednesday." Lena forced a smile, accepting the meager payment. The look in Vince's eyes told her everything. He liked having a live act, but her soulful style didn't always draw in the casual crowd looking for cover tunes. She packed up her guitar and took a final glance at the neon sign above the entrance, longing for an audience who might truly hear her. Outside, the night breeze carried the hum of cars and chatter from nearby bars. Lena walked briskly along the sidewalk, replaying the performance in her head. Despite the low turnout, a stubborn spark of optimism flickered within her. Something told her she was meant for more. As she passed a faded poster advertising a local music festival from years ago, she remembered her teenage self, once thrilled by the idea of a bigger stage. She resolved, silently, to keep pushing forward. Before heading home, she made a quick stop at Urban Grind, where she worked during the day as a barista. The cafe was closed, but the lights were still on as Chloe, her co-worker and friend, finished tidying up. Chloe was 26, with short, auburn hair and a warm, practical demeanor that often grounded Lena's wandering thoughts. She opened the door and welcomed Lena in with a hug. "How was the show?" Chloe asked, already guessing the answer from the weary expression on Lena's face. Lena placed her guitar case on a chair. Same old, a few tourists, a few regulars. Nothing life-changing, but it's okay. It's one step closer to where I want to be. Chloe offered a sympathetic smile. "You know, I've heard rumors there's some big producer in town. Word is he's scouting for new talent." "You never know. Austin's famous for that sort of thing." Lena laughed softly, as though the idea were too good to be true. "I'll believe it when he's standing right in front of me with a contract. Until then, I've got cappuccinos to make tomorrow." They chatted for a few more minutes while Chloe handed her a small bag of pastries, leftovers from the day that would otherwise go to waste. Lena thanked her and slipped them into her bag, feeling a mix of gratitude and faint embarrassment for needing the handout. If anything, it was a sign of how precarious her finances had become. At last, Lena stepped back onto the street and made her way to her tiny studio apartment. Once inside, she flicked on the single overhead light, revealing a cramped space decorated with music posters, scraps of half-written lyrics pinned to a corkboard, and the second-hand keyboard she used for songwriting. She tossed her guitar case onto the futon and shrugged off her jacket. Though exhausted, she couldn't ignore the gentle pull of creativity that often came after a performance, no matter how small. Removing her notebook from the table, she read over lines of a new song she'd been crafting, scribbled between coffee orders at work. The lyrics reflected the quiet resilience she felt, an insistence that her voice would not remain hidden forever. Her gaze drifted to a tattered poster on the wall, an old Austin City Limits advertisement featuring legendary musicians she'd admired since she was a teenager. It had yellowed with age, but she kept it for inspiration. The stories of people who started humbly, playing for spare change in bars, always reminded her that great careers could begin in the most unassuming of places. Sinking onto the futon, Lena let her eyes close. The performance replayed in her mind, accompanied by the memory of Vince's half-hearted approval and the handful of dollar bills in her pocket. As frustration threatened to overtake her, she clung to the kernel of hope that had guided her this far. No matter how small her audience, she needed to believe that the right person would hear her songs one day. Someday, she thought, people won't just look past me. Someday, I'll stand on a stage they can't ignore. With that final resolve, Lena allowed herself to rest. Tonight had been another small step, another echo in Austin. And though she had no idea what fate had in store, there was comfort in knowing that her voice, raw, imperfect, and achingly honest, would never truly be silenced. Early the next morning, Lena was behind the espresso machine at Urban Grind, wearing a black apron and pulling shots of coffee with practiced efficiency. She greeted each customer with a polite smile, though her mind was still tangled in the chords and lyrics from the night before. The shop buzzed with the energy of young professionals rushing to offices and students hurrying to morning classes. Chloe, arranging pastries in the display case, nudged Lena. "You look like you barely slept. Another late set at the Midnight Roar." "Yeah," Lena said, stifling a yawn. "A handful of people listened, which I guess is better than none." Chloe arched an eyebrow. "Well, rumor has it this big-name producer is indeed in town. People keep whispering about him showing up at different venues." Lena shook her head, trying not to let her heart quicken at the thought. If he's around, he's probably looking for artists with a bigger following. "I'm just a nobody who sings in bars for tips." A customer approached, and Lena quickly shifted her focus, preparing a latte with an artful swirl of foam. Her reflection in the stainless steel machine showed tired eyes and a hesitant smile. She realized, with a pang of longing, that she wanted more than just scraping by. Later that afternoon, as she bussed tables, she overheard two customers discussing a private showcase where scouts from major labels might appear. Her pulse sped up, but she tried to tamp down her excitement. Hearing about possibilities was one thing, actually seizing them was another. Once her shift ended, Lena grabbed her guitar from the back room and headed toward the Broken Spoke, a legendary Austin spot known for its open mic nights. She had promised Mateo, her guitarist friend, she would meet him there for a quick rehearsal before the evening crowd arrived. Mateo Ramirez was 25, tall, with long, dark hair often tied back in a loose ponytail. He had an easy confidence on stage and a fierce loyalty to what he called real music, an unpolished honesty untainted by corporate demands. As Lena walked in, she spotted him on a small stool, tuning his acoustic guitar. "Hey, stranger," Mateo said, flashing a genuine smile. "I was beginning to think you'd forgotten about me." "Never," Lena replied, setting her case down. "Just had the morning shift from hell." They spent the next hour running through a few of Lena's original songs. Mateo provided gentle riffs that complemented her soulful melodies. His ability to highlight the raw edge in her vocals made Lena feel both comfortable and driven to give her best. When the open mic session began, the bar was only half full, but a familiar wave of nerves swept through Lena's stomach. She stepped on stage, introduced herself and Mateo, then launched into one of her newer tunes. As her voice resonated through the modest sound system, A few heads turned. It wasn't a packed house, but she sensed a genuine interest from several audience members. Afterward, a short applause followed, and someone even approached her to ask if she had any recorded material. She admitted she only had a few rough demos, scribbled her email on a napkin, and hoped it might lead somewhere. For once, she felt a faint thrill. Maybe her music could reach beyond the corners of this venue. Matteo offered her a high five. "See? People are noticing, even if it's just a few. It's better than playing for a bar owner who doesn't get it." "True," she said, appreciating his unwavering support. "Chloe mentioned a producer might be in town. I don't want to get my hopes up, but maybe it's a sign that things can change." Matteo's face grew more serious. "It can be great if the right person hears you. But be careful, Lena. The music industry chews people up. I've seen too many friends chase deals that end up stealing their soul." She nodded, acknowledging his caution. "I know, but I also can't keep living gig to gig, scraping tips to make rent. If there's even a small chance to share my music on a bigger stage, I owe it to myself to try." As they packed up their instruments, the bar's neon lights flickered overhead. Lena felt that subtle tug of hope again. Maybe fate was indeed shifting. She recalled the rumor of a high-profile producer scouting local acts. It seemed both thrilling and unreal, but at least she was allowing the possibility to linger in her thoughts rather than dismissing it outright. On her way out, Lena paused at the door. Despite her lingering doubts, an unspoken determination moved through her. Every rumor and open mic session made her realize how badly she wanted this. She wanted to be heard, really heard, and not just be another hopeful voice drowned out by bar chatter. With a final glance at the small stage, she whispered a quiet promise to herself. If change was coming, she would be ready. Late that night, Lena found herself at her cluttered kitchen table, flipping through a worn binder of her original lyrics. A single lamp cast a soft glow across the pages, revealing crossed-out verses and half-finished ideas scribbled in pencil. She sighed, remembering the excitement she once felt drafting those lines, back when she believed talent alone could open every door. Outside, the quiet hum of Austin's nightlife had faded, leaving only the occasional sound of a car engine. She glanced at the clock, nearly midnight. Despite her exhaustion, she couldn't shake the swirl of questions in her head. What if some producer really was in Austin, searching for the next big thing? What if, by some miracle, he noticed her raw potential? And what if signing a contract meant losing the creative control she cherished so fiercely? Ever since Matteo warned her about the darker side of the industry, Lena had been torn. She craved recognition, but dreaded the possibility of selling out. Images of successful pop artists flickered through her mind. Some of them seemed to have soared to stardom at the cost of their soul. She closed the binder, running a hand through her curls. If an opportunity came, would she risk becoming just another pop facade? The ring of her phone jolted her out of her thoughts. It was a local number she didn't recognize. Hesitantly, she answered. For a moment, there was only static, and then a shaky breath on the other end. No one spoke. "Hello, who is this?" Lena said, her heart pounding. After another brief silence, the call disconnected. She frowned, setting the phone aside. An uneasy feeling settled in her chest, but she dismissed it as a random prank. Trying to calm her nerves, she brewed a cup of chamomile tea. Her mind drifted to the days when she was 16, scribbling lyrics in composition notebooks after school. Back then, she dreamt of playing big stages and bridging hearts with her songs, but real life had intervened. Her parents' modest financial situation, her own shyness, and the necessity of working menial jobs to survive. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Matteo. "Just checking on you. Keep your head up." She smiled softly. He was always protective, always ready to defend the purity of her music. Despite their bond, she wondered if he'd ever forgive her if she did sign a deal with a major label. Finishing her tea, Lena considered each line of the contract scenario she'd imagined so many times. The invisible bullet points in her mind were simple. No forced changes to her lyrics, no manufactured pop duets, and no illusions about who she was. And yet, she knew that the real world rarely worked in such neat lines. Major labels had marketing strategies, brand images, and talk of packaging. It made her recoil, even as she yearned for stability and a wider audience. The next day, she woke up still mulling over these thoughts. When she arrived at Urban Grind for her shift, Chloe greeted her with a concerned glance. "You good?" Chloe asked, handing Lena an apron. "You look like you've been up all night." Lena shrugged. "Just overthinking stuff, I guess. I'm stuck between wanting a break and fearing what it might cost." Chloe glanced at the line of customers forming. "Look, there's no shame in hoping for something bigger. You're beyond talented, and you've put in the time. You deserve to see where it leads. Just don't lose yourself in the process, okay?" That afternoon, after clocking out, Lena drifted through Austin's bustling streets, guitar slung over her shoulder. She ended up at the apartment of a small-time music manager who'd once offered to represent her. She'd turned him down before, suspecting he wasn't entirely transparent in his dealings. Now, she wondered if she'd been too cautious. Maybe that caution was holding her back from opportunities. As she stood outside the manager's apartment building, she hesitated. Did she really want to revisit old offers she'd previously deemed suspicious? The tug-of-war in her heart continued. She exhaled, deciding against it, and turned away. Back at her own apartment, she leafed through a pile of unopened mail, most of which were flyers and ads. She froze at one envelope with no return address. Inside, she found a glossy card that simply read, "A private musical showcase. Invitation only. Further details to follow." It was signed with an ornate initial, T. Lena's pulse kicked up. She stared at the mysterious card. T could stand for anything or anyone. What if it meant the rumored Arthur Thorne, the billionaire producer people kept talking about? Her excitement mixed with dread, forming a knot in her stomach. Biting her lip, she set the card down on her small kitchen table. Every fear Matteo had warned her about resurfaced. Every longing Chloe had gently encouraged surged. She was standing on the precipice of a dream she wasn't sure she could handle. Her gaze drifted back to the faded festival poster. She inhaled slowly, bracing herself. Dreams came with risks. The question was how far she was willing to go without betraying the music that lived in her soul. Over the next few days, Lena felt as if the world around her was closing in. Every time she tried to rehearse a new song, her eyes would stray to that glossy invitation card perched on her table. She hadn't decided yet whether she'd even attend the so-called private showcase. But the knowledge that someone important was watching her life from a distance shook her composure. At work, she fumbled more than once with espresso orders, earning pointed looks from the cafe manager. Chloe would intervene, whispering jokes to lighten the mood, but even her humor couldn't dispel the unease in Lena's mind. Matteo dropped by the cafe one afternoon, leaning against the counter while Lena finished serving a pair of college students. He had that concerned furrow in his brow that only deepened when he sensed Lena was troubled. "What's on your mind?" he asked quietly, once the cafe had a brief lull. Lena wiped her hands on a dish towel. "Something arrived in the mail, an invitation to a private showcase. No details except a date, time, and a fancy T signature. Chloe and I both suspect it's from this producer everyone's been talking about." Matteo's expression darkened slightly. "Arthur Thorne, right? I've heard rumors he's ruthless about shaping artists into marketable products." She nodded. I'm scared. It could be my one shot, but I also know I can't handle being turned into some pop puppet. Before Matteo could reply, the manager signaled for Lena to handle a new wave of customers. Matteo offered a supportive smile and slipped out. Lena watched him go, feeling a swirl of gratitude and guilt. She knew he was only looking out for her best interests, but his warnings replayed in her mind like a scratched record. That evening, she headed to her apartment, determined to clear her head by practicing. However, the moment she strummed her guitar, her phone buzzed with a text from the same unknown number that had called her before. We're eager to hear you. Don't let fear stop you. No name, just that cryptic encouragement. She felt a chill. Whoever was behind this was stepping up the pressure. Later, while scrolling through social media, Lena noticed a few local musicians posting about a grand event happening soon at the Austonian, one of Austin's tallest and most luxurious hotels. People whispered that top-tier producers from Los Angeles were flying in, and that not everyone would get through the door. The more she read, the clearer it became this was likely the showcase the invitation mentioned. She tried to sleep but found herself tossing and turning. Her finances were dire. Another month of half-empty tip jars could leave her unable to cover rent. If this was in fact a chance to sign with a big label, could she really afford not to go? Yet her conscience reminded her of everything she held dear. The emotional honesty in her songs, her creative freedom. By morning, she decided she had to at least see what the invitation entailed. Avoiding it out of fear felt like the wrong move. If it turned out to be a trap or an empty promise, she could walk away. At least that was what she told herself to quell her anxiety. She texted Matteo a tentative plan. I'm thinking of showing up, just to get more info. Nothing else. His reply was swift. It's your choice, but please be careful. Breathing a little easier, Lena resolved to give her best performance at the Midnight Roar that night, hoping to find clarity in music. The set went by in a blur of heartbreak ballads and atmospheric covers, yet no matter how deeply she tried to immerse herself in each note, the awareness of the looming showcase weighed on her. After the show, she approached Vince for her tip share, but he only shrugged apologetically. Not many folks spending tonight, sorry kid. She counted the meager bills in her hand. It stung more than ever. A reminder that her dream offered precious little security. Resentment flickered within her, though she tried to bury it with thoughts of the upcoming event at the Austonian. Walking home, guitar case heavy in her hand, Lena felt as though she was balancing on a narrow ledge. On one side lay the small comfort of her familiar but financially strained life. On the other, a glittering unknown that might either elevate her or crush her spirit entirely. As she rounded the corner to her apartment, she spotted a sealed envelope on the ground near her door. Inside was another stark reminder, an overdue notice from her utilities provider. The final line threatened disconnection if payment wasn't received by the end of the month. Pulse racing, she stepped into her apartment and locked the door behind her. Reality was undeniable. She was running out of time, out of money, out of excuses to stay in her safe corner. She glanced at the invitation on her table. In a single fluid motion, she picked it up. Whatever the outcome, she would face it head-on. There was no room left for hesitation. The pressures were everywhere, and they refused to let her simply hide. The following evening, Lena stepped into the opulent lobby of the Austonian, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. She had never set foot in a place so polished. Chandeliers glittered overhead, and the marble floors reflected the glow of ornate lamps. Every detail announced wealth and power, a striking contrast to Lena's life of cramped apartments and cheap coffee. She approached the front desk, invitation in hand, trying not to feel dwarfed by the grandeur. An impeccably dressed clerk scanned the card and nodded, directing her to a private lounge on one of the upper floors. Lena forced her feet to move, adjusting the strap of her guitar case on her shoulder. Stepping out of the elevator, she was greeted by thick carpet and the muted hum of conversation. The lounge was intimate, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the Austin skyline at twilight. A small stage with a single microphone stood at the far end, unoccupied. Scattered throughout were individuals in designer suits and dresses, sipping sparkling beverages. Standing near the window was a tall man with dark hair combed neatly back, dressed in a tailored suit that accentuated his poised demeanor. Even from a distance, Lena felt his gaze, a keen, focused stare that seemed to dissect everything he observed. She had no doubt this was Arthur Thorne, the famed billionaire producer. Beside him stood Evelyn Reed, an elegant woman in her early 40s, exuding an air of professional detachment. She kept glancing at a tablet, checking names, occasionally whispering into Arthur's ear. Lena's stomach clenched at the sight of these two. They radiated competence and influence, the kind that could make or break a career. Her plan was to stay quiet, glean information, and decide whether she was truly ready for this world. But before she could shrink into the background, a confident voice broke the space between them. "You must be Lena Morgan." She turned to see Arthur Thorne approaching, extending a hand. He was 32, but a certain timeless presence about him suggested he was used to power and success. His handshake was firm, but not aggressive. "I'm Arthur. I've heard a bit about you," he said, his tone measured. "You've been building a local reputation in certain circles." Flustered, Lena nodded. "Word travels fast in Austin, I guess." Arthur's gaze flickered to her guitar case. "Care to show me what all the talk is about?" The question struck her like a bolt of adrenaline. She'd imagined someone might ask her to play, but she hadn't expected it so soon. She swallowed, feeling her heart flutter. If she refused, she might look unprepared. If she accepted, she'd be stepping onto a stage in front of powerful strangers with no warm-up or plan. Summoning courage, Lena walked to the small platform. The hush that fell over the room was tangible. She positioned the microphone and took a moment to steady her breathing. Then she began, soft, tentative notes that grew bolder as she gained confidence. She chose one of her original songs, a piece that spoke about chasing an elusive dream through lonely nights. Her voice echoed in the glass and steel surroundings, the same ragged truth she always carried in bars, only now it danced among expensive suits and glittering jewelry. She closed her eyes, poured her soul into each lyric, and forgot about her nerves for just that moment. When she finished, a silence stretched across the lounge. Then came a smattering of polite applause, joined by a few audible murmurs of appreciation. Arthur Thorne, hands folded, wore a small, inscrutable smile. Evelyn Reed typed notes rapidly on her tablet. Arthur approached the stage. "Thank you, Lena. That was unfiltered. I appreciate hearing raw talent in such a pure form. Perhaps we should talk." Lena's pulse hammered. She nodded, stepping down carefully. Her gaze darted around, noticing the curious stares from others in the room. Part of her longed to retreat, but another part, just as strong, thrilled at the idea that this could be it. He led her to a corner table where a leather-bound folder lay. Evelyn joined them, maintaining a composed demeanor. Arthur flipped open the folder, revealing a thick sheaf of papers. "Thorne Music Group invests heavily in new talent. I think your voice has commercial potential, but also something deeper. We'd be interested in developing that." Lena swallowed hard. "Developing that how?" Evelyn's cool voice cut in. "We handle image, marketing, management, and ensure you reach the widest audience possible. That requires cooperation, a certain alignment with our guidelines." She bristled, remembering all of Mateo's warnings. but the mention of a widest audience tugged at her heart. This was precisely the break she'd prayed for when she sang to near-empty bars. Arthur slid a discreet, typed document toward her. "Look it over, please. It's a preliminary contract, outlining terms including compensation. Of course, we'll discuss specifics, but from the numbers alone, I'm confident this opportunity might change your life." Lena held the paper in shaking hands. The figures were astronomical compared to her current reality. She glimpsed the first clause, though her vision blurred from excitement and apprehension. Something about public image and conduct, but she couldn't process it fully yet. She thought of Mateo, of Chloe, of the nights at the midnight roar. Everything was shifting under her feet. Fighting the urge to flee, she glanced up at Arthur and Evelyn, unsure whether she was walking into a dream or a trap. "Let's talk," she heard herself say, as both fear and exhilaration warred inside her. Lena found herself back in the elegantly furnished lounge of the Austonian, 2 days after her initial encounter with Arthur Thorne. He'd invited her to return for a more detailed discussion, and though her nerves were on edge, she felt a defiant excitement pulsing through her. The promise of opportunity swirled in the air, making it hard to ignore the rapid beat of her heart. Arthur greeted her with a confident handshake, guiding her toward a corner table draped in sleek linens. A tall window behind them showcased Austin's skyline under the midday sun, an apt reflection of the bright possibilities that might lie ahead. Evelyn Reed stood nearby, tapping details into her ever-present tablet, her cool gaze noting every move Lena made. "Glad you're here," Arthur began, sliding a revised contract across the table. "I've had my legal team polish a few details. I think you'll be pleased with what we're proposing." Lena, seated, gently ran her fingers over the folder before opening it. The moment she scanned the first page, her eyes flicked to the bold figures outlined in black ink, figures representing a signing bonus that seemed surreal compared to her daily struggles. Her mind flashed to unpaid bills, a tiny apartment, and late-night gigs. But those life realities clashed with the intangible cost. Would this contract demand more than just her music? Across from her, Arthur steepled his fingers, observing her silence. Evelyn eventually broke the pause. "The compensation is sizable because we believe in your potential, but you should understand the obligations we expect in return." Lena looked up. "What obligations are we talking about?" Before Evelyn could respond, Arthur leaned forward. "We have a thorough image and conduct clause. From past experience, when I invest at this level, I want to ensure my artists maintain a public persona that aligns with the company's brand. We guide you through interviews, photo shoots, social media, everything. You'll have a team supporting you every step of the way." Lena swallowed. That team, she suspected, would also exert control over how she looked, dressed, and behaved. Yet the check staring back at her was impossible to dismiss. "So I'd still be singing my songs, just with some strategic polishing," she ventured. Evelyn shifted her stance, crossing her arms. "The label might suggest lyrical edits if we think it'll broaden your audience, but Arthur values authenticity. We won't strip away your core identity. We'll just refine it for mainstream appeal." The words refine and mainstream appeal stirred a knot in Lena's stomach. She cast a glance at Arthur, trying to read sincerity in his expression. His tone carried a note of reassurance. "Think of it as a partnership. We amplify your voice, and in return, you trust us to shape the overall vision." Just then, a commotion erupted at the far end of the lounge. Dylan Dash Cooper, famous in the pop world for catchy hooks and an endlessly charming grin, strode in with 2 assistants trailing him. He wore ripped jeans, a designer jacket, and exuded that confident swagger of someone used to the spotlight. Spotting Arthur, Dylan raised a hand in greeting, then, noticing Lena, gave her a curious once-over. Arthur invited Dylan over with a subtle wave. "Lena, meet Dylan Cooper, one of our brightest stars. Dylan, this is Lena Morgan, a promising talent from Austin." Dylan grinned. "So, you're the one Arthur's been raving about. Nice to meet you." They shook hands. Lena felt the subtle tension in Dylan's gaze, part polite interest, part guarded caution. In some ways, he, too, seemed like a pawn in a larger game, an artist who'd surrendered a slice of freedom for the big leagues. "I'm in town for a radio spot," Dylan explained, leaning casually against a chair. "Arthur thought it'd be good to swing by and say hi. You looking to sign with Thorn Music Group?" "I'm considering it," Lena answered carefully. Arthur, always perceptive, stepped in. Dylan's success illustrates what can happen when you trust the process. He embraced the marketing strategies, the scheduling, and in return found massive chart success. There's no reason you can't do the same if you're willing. Evelyn glanced at her tablet. "We're finalizing the schedule for a new promotional push, Dylan. Then we'll coordinate with Lena's rollout once everything's signed." Lena's pulse quickened. They spoke as though her decision was merely a formality. She blinked, conjuring an image of Mateo's face, his warnings about selling out. But she also recalled her mounting bills, her yearning for a larger stage. Arthur, seeing her hesitation, lifted the folder once more. "Look, take your time. You can have a few days to review the details. I don't want you to rush, and I don't want regrets. This is a big step." Dylan offered a small, encouraging nod. "They're demanding, but in the end, you'll get where you want to be." Lena rose, smoothing her skirt. She thought of the hush that fell whenever she sang, the magic that might reach millions if she teamed up with the right people. "Okay," she said softly. "I'll review it carefully." With that, Arthur thanked her, an undercurrent of satisfaction in his voice. As she made her exit, she could feel Evelyn's analytical gaze on her back, already plotting a roadmap for the Lena Morgan brand. Dylan cast a final grin, though his eyes hinted at complexities beneath the surface. Walking out into the Texas sunlight, Lena clutched the contract folder. It promised life-altering sums and opportunities she'd only daydreamed about. Yet her heart fluttered with apprehension, aware that a contract this big never came without strings attached. Outside the Estonian, she paused. The city noise enveloped her, car horns, distant music, chatter. She breathed in deeply, steeling herself for the challenge ahead. This was the first real test, deciding whether to sign away pieces of her soul in exchange for the future she'd always wanted. Lena stood in the cramped back room at Urban Grind, her hands trembling slightly as she folded her barista apron for the last time. She had just informed her manager she was leaving, though she remained vague about the specifics. Her manager, an older woman named Rochelle, looked disappointed but wished her luck. Across the cafe, Chloe caught Lena's eye and approached with a look of both pride and concern. "So, this is it?" Chloe asked softly, crossing her arms in an attempt to hide her emotion. "You're really walking away from the daily grind?" Lena offered a shaky smile. "I've thought it through. If I'm serious about this contract, assuming I do sign, I can't juggle barista shifts and random gigs. I need to give music my full attention." Chloe nodded, wiping a stray tear. "I get it. I'm happy for you. Just promise you won't disappear without a trace, a phone call now and then." "You better believe I'll call," Lena said, voice cracking a little. Urban Grind had been her safety net for months, a place that funded her dream in the smallest of ways. Walking out felt like leaving a piece of stability behind. She stepped outside, inhaling the familiar Austin air one last time. A hot, dry breeze swept across her face, as if reminding her that this city was home. The rumble of distant guitars from a nearby bar reminded her of the local scene that had nurtured her from the beginning. Part of her felt like she was betraying those roots, but deep down, she knew she couldn't stay stuck forever. That evening, she texted Matteo, asking him to meet at her apartment. She needed to explain everything, especially the potential move to Los Angeles. When he arrived, guitar slung over his shoulder, his expression told her he already suspected what was coming. "I'm heading out," Lena began. "Arthur's offered me a chance to see the Thorn music group up close and probably record some tracks. The contract includes relocation to LA. I don't know how long I'll be gone." Matteo tensed, his brow furrowing. "So that's it, you're just leaving Austin behind? And what about the music we've been creating together? I thought we were going to make it as a team." His disappointment pressed on her chest like a weight. "We still can. This doesn't have to be the end of our partnership. Let me see what's really happening out there. Once I've got some leverage, maybe I can bring you in." He plucked a chord on his guitar absent-mindedly, eyes cast downward. "I don't know if that's how it works. When labels get involved, they want to shape your sound, your collaborators, even your look. Are you sure this won't just swallow you?" The question hit home. Lena bit her lip, recalling the thick contract and Evelyn's promise to refine her style. "I'm not sure of anything. But I do know I can't stay stuck here, playing bars for a handful of tips. This might be my chance to break through." Matteo sighed, frustration lining his voice. "Just promise me you won't forget who you are. The Lena I know has something special, something no label has the right to tame." They hugged, the air thick with uncertainty. It felt like an unspoken goodbye, though neither dared phrase it that way. Within a day, Lena had a plane ticket booked, courtesy of Thorn Music Group's travel department. She filled a single suitcase with essentials, mostly clothes, notebooks, and her favorite guitar picks, while stacking the rest of her belongings in cardboard boxes she'd store at Chloe's place for now. Her landlord eyed her suspiciously when she gave notice, but that was the least of her worries. The final evening before her departure, she paid one last visit to the Midnight Roar. It wasn't an official gig, just a spontaneous drop-in to say farewell to the space that had hosted her many hopeful nights. Vince, the owner, gave her a casual nod, not grasping the enormity of her goodbye. She ordered a water, surveyed the worn-out tables, and listened to a band on stage playing a rowdy country tune. In the half-light, she remembered all the times she'd stood up there, heart pounding, voice cracking with desire to be seen. Walking out, she took a last glance at the battered neon sign. A surge of emotions tightened her throat. Gratitude, sadness, anticipation. She whispered an internal promise. "I'll come back stronger, or I won't come back at all." Early the next morning, she rode a taxi to the airport. In the back seat, her guitar case rested upright beside her, a silent companion. As the cab sped along the highway, Lena gazed out at the silhouette of Austin's skyline. Her phone buzzed occasionally with texts, Chloe's well wishes, a terse message from Matteo that simply read, "Safe travels." She resisted the urge to second-guess her decision. This was, for better or worse, the leap she had to take. Inside the terminal, she found her gate, clutching her boarding pass. Anxiety mingled with a surge of adrenaline. The call for her flight resonated over the speakers. Standing at the threshold, she inhaled and stepped forward. Los Angeles awaited, a world away from the cafes and honky-tonks she'd known, a world of glitz and possibility that might devour her or set her free. Lena stepped off the plane at LAX and immediately felt the difference. Everything seemed bigger, faster, and more visually arresting. The bustle of passengers navigating the terminal buzzed with frenetic energy. A sleek, black sedan awaited her at the curb, sent by Thorn Music Group. The driver, holding a small placard with her name, greeted her politely, and took her guitar case. As they drove along the freeway, palm trees whirred past under a sky that felt impossibly bright. Billboards advertising blockbuster movies and chart-topping albums loomed overhead, each one a reminder that this city was built on colossal dreams. Lena stared wide-eyed from the back seat, heart hammering with anticipation. She'd never been anywhere quite like this, and a giddy sense of wonder pulsed through her, tinged with trepidation. The car pulled up to the Thorn Tower in downtown LA, an imposing skyscraper of gleaming glass and steel. On the ground floor, a tastefully modern lobby displayed an enormous digital screen, cycling through images of Thorn Music Group's biggest stars. She glimpsed Dylan Cooper's beaming face and recognized a handful of other artists. The thought that her own face might someday appear there made her stomach flip. A sharp-dressed receptionist guided her to the elevator, which whooshed upward in near silence. Stepping out on the 20th floor, Lena was greeted by Evelyn Reed, holding a latte in one hand and a clipboard in the other. "Welcome to Los Angeles," Evelyn said briskly, ushering Lena forward. They walked down a corridor lined with framed platinum records and promotional posters. Lena's palms dampened as she noted the significance of each achievement. This building was more than corporate gloss. It was a shrine to success and, perhaps, cautionary tales. Evelyn opened a door leading to a spacious office with floor-to-ceiling windows, revealing the cityscape. Arthur Thorne stood near a sleek wooden desk, phone pressed to his ear. He finished his call and offered Lena a measured smile. "Good flight, I hope. Welcome to the heart of it all." "It's overwhelming but exciting," Lena replied, setting her bag down. She'd deliberately chosen to wear a simple black dress and low heels, aiming for a balance of comfort and professionalism. She felt a little awkward, unsure if her attire matched the polished world she was stepping into. Arthur motioned for her to sit on a white leather sofa. "Let's get you settled. We've arranged temporary accommodations at a serviced apartment. You'll find it comfortable, close to the studio and the necessary contacts." Evelyn handed Lena a set of keys. "Here's everything you need for now. Your schedule for the next week is already planned. We'll start with a meeting to outline your media training sessions. Then you'll visit the studio for initial recordings. There's also a styling appointment booked with Vivian Chen to refine your look." Lena swallowed. "All right, I'm eager to see how it all works." Arthur's gaze seemed kind, yet it carried an underlying firmness. "Take it one step at a time. The demands are high, but the results, if you commit, can be extraordinary. I believe in your voice. Now, let's make sure the world gets to hear it." That afternoon, Evelyn whisked Lena through a rapid tour of Thorn Tower's key floors. They peered into bustling marketing departments, dotted with giant screens displaying analytics and trending hashtags. They peeked into conference rooms where publicists hammered out press releases. Lena's head spun from the sheer scope of it all. Eventually, they reached a floor devoted to creative development, a labyrinth of studios, editing suites, and mixing booths. Musicians and producers hustled around, wearing stylish clothes and serious expressions. Lena passed a glass window into one studio and caught a glimpse of an artist belting into a microphone while an engineer monitored the levels. A pang of both envy and excitement struck her. Soon, that could be her. After the tour, a driver took Lena to her new apartment. She found it perched on the 12th floor of a modern high-rise, complete with contemporary furniture, a tiny balcony, and panoramic views of the city. Dropping onto the couch, she let out a breath, scanning the silent space. No postcards, no personal mementos, just crisp white walls and an untouched kitchen. It felt like a luxury hotel rather than a home. Maybe that was fitting, she thought. She was a visitor in this world, still uncertain if she belonged. Unpacking, she made sure to place her worn guitar carefully beside the sofa. a reminder of who she was before stepping onto the polished floors of Thorn Music Group. She powered on her phone to see a message from Mateo. "Heard you arrived. Be safe." It was brief, but it warmed her. She also saw a text from Chloe, filled with exclamation marks and heart emojis, urging her to send photos. Night fell quickly. Standing on the balcony, Lena gazed at the shimmering city lights, millions of stories unfolding below. Despite the swirl of intimidation and hope, one truth anchored her. This was her shot to reach a bigger stage, to sing her songs to people she'd never meet otherwise. She closed her eyes, letting the hum of LA's traffic blend with her heartbeat, grateful for the chance to chase something bigger, even if it frightened her. The next morning, Lena arrived at the Thorn Music Group's main studio complex, aptly nicknamed the Sound Factory. The building's exterior was inconspicuous, but once inside, she was greeted by sleek hallways illuminated with ambient lighting. Framed covers of chart-topping albums lined the walls, a testament to the facility's pedigree. A young assistant named Rory introduced himself at the reception. He had sandy blonde hair, round glasses, and an eager grin that spoke volumes about his excitement to work in such an iconic space. "Welcome, Ms. Morgan. I'll be helping you with scheduling, and if you need anything, I'm your guy." Lena smiled. "Thanks, Rory." "Please, call me Lena." He walked her through the maze of studios, each door discreetly labeled with an artist's name or a project code. He explained that Thorn Music Group boasted state-of-the-art equipment, top engineers, and an environment that allowed for both collaboration and privacy. Lena felt a surge of nervous anticipation, realizing how much more polished this setting was compared to the humble backroom setup she'd grown used to. Finally, they arrived at Studio 3, where a glass partition separated the performance space from the control room. A couple of producers fiddled with soundboards, adjusting levels on digital monitors. One of them, a stocky, balding man named Curtis, looked up with a raised eyebrow. He'd been briefed on Lena's arrival, but seemed skeptical of unproven talent. Rory made quick introductions. Lena placed her guitar case on a rack and slipped off her jacket, suddenly self-conscious under the bright overhead lights. She noticed a poster pinned to a corkboard, listing time slots for established acts. Names she'd seen trending on social media. Just the idea of sharing the same space as those big stars ignited her pulse. Once the polite small talk was done, Lena stood in the recording booth. She donned a pair of headphones that felt snug around her curls. The slight hiss of the microphone and the insulated silence reminded her of how intimate and exposing a studio session could be. Curtis's voice crackled through her headphones. "Let's hear one of your originals. Keep it raw, no backing track, just you and the guitar." Her mind flashed to the nights in Austin, singing for tips. She gripped the guitar, inhaled a steady breath, and closed her eyes. Her fingers formed the first chord of a song she'd scribbled into her notebook months ago, a reflective piece called "City of Dusk." She let the words flow, channeling that mix of longing and resilience she carried everywhere. When she finished, the headphones filled with static again before Curtis spoke. "Nice tone. Raspy, emotional, a bit unpolished, but that's workable." He paused, perhaps gauging her reaction. "We might smooth out a few edges for radio, but the potential is there." Lena swallowed, uncertain whether to feel complimented or nervous about smoothing out edges. She stepped out of the booth, sliding off the headphones. Curtis greeted her with a half-smile, nodding in grudging approval. "All right, let's call it a day for initial tracking," he said. "We'll meet again tomorrow to figure out which songs to refine." Before she could respond, the studio door opened, revealing Arthur Thorne, dressed in a casual blazer and dark jeans. He surveyed the room, then fixed his attention on Lena with a nod of acknowledgement. "How's she sounding?" Curtis shrugged. I can see why you signed her. She's got raw power. Lena felt a small bloom of pride, though she also braced for any disclaimers about her needing a commercial makeover. Arthur's gaze flicked to her guitar. You comfortable here so far? She nodded. It's a world away from what I'm used to, but I'm excited to learn. Good, Arthur said, turning to Curtis. Let's not crush her authenticity. Polishing is fine, but we signed her for that unique quality. Keep me posted. That singular statement, let's not crush her authenticity, sent relief surging through Lena's chest. Maybe her voice wouldn't be drowned in auto-tune and glossy production after all. After the session, Arthur invited her for a quick coffee in the lounge area, a modern space with floor-to-ceiling windows offering glimpses of palm trees below. As they sipped cappuccinos, he asked about her background, her songwriting inspirations, and her creative process. She described how she'd grown up listening to alt-rock and soul, scribbling poetry that later turned into lyrics. He listened intently, occasionally nodding or asking follow-up questions. There was something almost disarming in the way he focused on her every word. As their conversation wound down, Arthur's phone chimed. He glanced at the screen with a slight frown. I have a meeting to run to, he said, standing up. But I'd like you to meet some of the team tomorrow. Marketing, press, all that. They'll help shape how we present you. She gave a polite smile, ignoring the flutter of apprehension. I'll be there. Welcome again to the Sound Factory, he said, giving her a final, encouraging nod. Left alone, Lena gazed out the window. This was precisely the step she'd yearned for, the chance to record in a real studio and have her voice reach beyond the smoky bars of Austin. Yet beneath her excitement, a quiet voice reminded her to tread carefully. She was no longer just Lena Morgan, unknown singer. She was a potential product, a brand. For now, though, that brand was in her hands. If only she could keep it. 2 nights later, Lena found herself sitting in a sleek town car with tinted windows, speeding along the Pacific Coast Highway. She'd been told to dress nicely for dinner at Nobu Malibu, one of the city's trendiest spots. According to Evelyn's text, this was less about leisure and more about public introduction, a curated chance to display Thorn Music Group's newest signing. She wore a simple, fitted black dress, her hair in loose curls. Every so often, she glanced at her phone, half expecting a message from Mateo or Chloe offering last-minute reassurance. Instead, all she saw were notifications from industry reps and a short note from Dylan Cooper, "Be ready for paparazzi." Sure enough, when the car pulled up to the restaurant, flashes erupted. Photographers snapped pictures of anyone who emerged from a sleek vehicle, hoping to catch a celebrity. A polite escort guided Lena inside, where a hostess led her to a reserved table by the glass windows overlooking the sea. The hush of the ocean contrasted sharply with the clinking silverware and muted chatter of a privileged crowd. A moment later, Dylan Cooper appeared, wearing designer jeans, a crisp white shirt, and a tailored jacket. His hair was impeccably styled, and a confident grin formed on his lips when he spotted Lena. "Hey, thought I'd get here before you, but guess you beat me to it." His casual tone felt practiced, yet there was an underlying tension in his eyes. Lena gave him a small smile. "Barely. Traffic's insane. Nice place, though." "Arthur insisted we do something public," Dylan replied, taking a seat across from her. "He thinks it's good for the media to catch a glimpse of us hanging out. Adds a narrative to the new artist rollouts." Lena's stomach churned. She knew about the label's penchant for orchestrating romantic entanglements, or at least friendly alliances. Was that why she was here, across from Dylan, about to endure the inevitable rumor mill? A server arrived with menus and water. Dylan thanked him, then leaned in, speaking softly. "I know this is all weird. I'm supposed to act like we're close friends so the cameras can spin a story. Don't worry, I won't push anything you're uncomfortable with. Her shoulders eased slightly. Thanks, I appreciate that. This is all kind of surreal. He flashed a half smile, fiddling with his napkin. Get used to it. The label loves a headline. I was in your shoes a few years ago, fresh off a local gig, starry-eyed. They thrust me into the spotlight with a carefully crafted persona. The hype was huge, and I kinda lost track of my own voice. Lena exhaled, relieved to find him candid. Doesn't it bother you, pretending for the sake of image? Dylan looked away momentarily, gaze drifting to the rolling waves outside. It does, but I've learned to compartmentalize. There's the real me, then there's the brand me. It's how I pay the bills, keep the producers happy and stay relevant. Once in a while, I slip a genuine song on an album, but mostly, it's catchy pop hooks the label loves. Lena's heart clenched at his words, an echo of her greatest fear. So you compromise, she murmured. He shrugged. We all do, to some extent, but listen, it's not all doom and gloom. I've gotten opportunities I never dreamed possible. And if you navigate carefully, you can keep some authenticity. Before she could reply, a flash caught her eye. Paparazzi outside, pressing cameras against the glass. Dylan let out a short laugh. Showtime? He reached across the table, gently touching Lena's hand in a seemingly intimate gesture. Cameras clicked like mad from beyond the window. Feeling self-conscious, she forced a smile, as if amused by his remark. The pressure to look carefree gnawed at her. She found herself glancing around, wondering if Arthur or Evelyn were observing from a distance. They ordered sushi, and conversation alternated between forced banter intended for onlookers and hushed honesty. Dylan asked about her music, whether she was getting to record the kind of songs she wanted. Lena told him about her first session, how the producers were nice enough but suggested changes she wasn't entirely sold on. He nodded sympathetically. I get it. My earliest songs got scrubbed of any grit or edge so they'd chart better. You might have to fight for every lyric you care about, but maybe with Arthur's favor, you'll have more leverage than I did. Dinner dragged on with more camera flashes. Lena played along, aware that everything from their posture to their laughter was on display. Eventually, the paparazzi shifted focus to another celebrity at a nearby table, giving her a moment to exhale. When the bill was settled, charged to the label, of course, Dylan walked her out. The night air was cool against her warm cheeks. Photographers hovered near the entrance, capturing their exit. Dylan placed a casual hand on her shoulder, leaning in as if sharing a private joke. The cameras went wild. You did well, he whispered under the flurry of camera shutters. Evelyn will be thrilled. Lena forced a small laugh, heart pounding at the absurdity of it all. She understood now. Image was everything, and the label had no qualms orchestrating illusions. As she slid into the waiting car, she felt uneasy. This arranged encounter was her introduction to how Thorn Music Group shaped narratives, and it left her both dazzled and disturbed. Lena was in the middle of a photo shoot at Apex Studios, a cavernous space bathed in harsh white light. Multicolored backdrops hung from the ceiling, and high-energy pop music blared from overhead speakers. The famous photographer Pierre Dubois strode around, barking directions at assistants who adjusted the lighting and tested camera angles. Chin up, shoulders back. Tilt your head just a bit, Pierre commanded, snapping shot after shot. Lena complied, trying to project the ideal combination of confidence and approachability. She wore a designer jacket and tight black jeans, a styled look Vivienne Chen had chosen for her new image. Across the room, Evelyn Reed stood with her arms folded, monitoring the shoot. Every so often, she whispered notes into her phone, probably critiques about Lena's posture, expression, or the clothes. The constant scrutiny was a world apart from the intimate moments Lena once shared on stage at the Midnight Roar. There, she could sing with her eyes closed, entirely immersed in her music. Here, her every facial muscle felt judged. Pierre lowered his camera and frowned. "We need more charm, darling, more presence. Right now, you look like you're mentally somewhere else." Lena exhaled shakily. "I'm trying, it's just not my usual environment." He clucked his tongue. "Welcome to the big leagues. It's your job now to command attention, not shrink from it." "Let's go again." She forced a tight smile. As the flash went off repeatedly, she found herself remembering how Dylan had touched her hand at Nobu Malibu for the paparazzi. A manufactured moment, but one that served the label's narrative. That memory, combined with Pierre's demands, stirred a sense of unease in her chest. She was constantly reminded that her public face had to impress. When Pierre finally called for a break, Lena stepped off the set and accepted a bottle of water from an assistant. Her throat felt constricted, like she was struggling to swallow the artificial persona the label was crafting. Evelyn approached, heels clicking sharply on the polished floor. "You need to relax," Evelyn murmured. A forced smile never photographs well. "I know," Lena said, pressing the cold bottle to her forehead. "I'm just not used to faking it." Evelyn's gaze cooled further. "A certain amount of performance is necessary. Remember, you're not just a singer anymore. You're a brand. To elevate you, we need to ensure you look comfortable being in the spotlight." Before Lena could respond, Pierre signaled for the next round. She downed more water, steeled herself, and returned to the set. This time she tried to channel genuine excitement, a spark of the thrill she felt when performing original songs. The resulting photos, though still contrived, came out a bit more dynamic. After the session ended, Lena headed to a corner of the studio to gather her belongings. She grabbed her phone to see a text from Dylan. "Heard you have a shoot today. Hang in there." A small grin flickered on her lips. At least he understood. Vivian Chen joined her, brushing lint off Lena's jacket. "Not so bad, right?" she asked with a gentle smile. "Pierre can be harsh, but he's brilliant. These shots will be everywhere once your first single drops." Lena nodded. "I appreciate all you've done, Vivian. You've at least tried to keep some of my style in these outfits." "Because I know how this industry works," Vivian said, lowering her voice. "If you give up too much of yourself, you'll hate what you see in the mirror, so push back when it matters." Those words lingered in Lena's mind as she left Apex Studios. Riding in the back of a black SUV arranged by the label, she scrolled through social media posts about her. New fan pages had sprung up since photos at Nobu Malibu circulated. Some hailed her as a fresh face in the music scene. Others accused her of riding Dylan's coattails. A few even questioned her authenticity, pointing out the abrupt shift from bar singer to polished starlet. Later that day, she arrived at the sound factory for a rehearsal. Curtis greeted her with a curt nod, but he seemed slightly less wary than before. "Heard the photo shoot went okay," he commented, ready to lay down a few test vocals. In the booth, Lena tried to sing with her usual depth of emotion, yet something felt off. The stress of the morning lingered, and she found it difficult to sink into the raw vulnerability that once came so naturally. Her voice quivered under the weight of self-consciousness. Curtis noticed. After a take, he pressed the intercom. "You sound tense. Take 5. Clear your head." Setting aside her headphones, Lena wandered into the hallway. She realized she'd scarcely had a moment to herself since arriving in LA. Her schedule packed with photo shoots, media training, meetings. Her songs had always come from a place of solitude and reflection, but here, solitude was a luxury. Dylan was passing by and stopped when he saw her. "Everything okay?" he asked, stepping closer. She shrugged. "Honestly, I feel like I'm losing track of who I am in the middle of all these demands." His sympathetic smile was tinged with understanding. "Yeah, it's easy to drown here. Keep reminding yourself why you started singing in the first place." She nodded, trying not to let her frustration show. "I'm just worried that I'm not enough for them the way I am." Dylan gave her shoulder a gentle squeeze. "You are. They just don't always know how to see it, but you can't lose sight of it." His quiet support bolstered her enough to return to the studio, determined to reclaim at least a fraction of her authenticity. But as she stepped back into the sound booth, she realized that although her voice belonged to her, the persona being shaped around it already showed hairline cracks, and with every forced smile and orchestrated moment, those cracks threatened to grow. The day of her first single's official recording dawned with a buzz of excitement and tension at the Sound Factory. Lena had spent the past week rehearsing a reworked version of Echoes in the Glass, one of her songs that Thorn Music Group decided to push. Producers had softened some of the grittier edges, added a polished pop hook, and introduced layered backing vocals. It wasn't exactly how she envisioned it, but she held on to the fragments of her style that remained. Evelyn, perched at a table in the control room, oversaw final details with a team of marketing assistants. Meanwhile, Curtis fine-tuned the instrumentals. Dylan had stopped by to offer moral support, leaning against the wall with an encouraging nod whenever Lena met his gaze. At last, Lena stepped into the recording booth, adjusting her headphones as the track's introduction played in her ears. She took a deep breath, remembering the nights back in Austin when she'd poured her heart out on that tiny stage. Now, the stakes were higher than ever. She sang with as much soul as she could muster, focusing on each lyric she'd written. Though the backing track had changed the feel of the piece, the words were still hers, lines about searching for truth in a world of illusion, about the desperate need to hear one's own voice echoing back. After multiple takes, Curtis signaled her to step out. He replayed the final version, letting the new single thrum through the sound system. The production was undeniably catchy, the chorus soared, and Lena's raspy timbre threaded it all with a unique edge. Evelyn tapped her fingers on the table, as if envisioning radio success. "Good job," Curtis said, his voice less gruff than usual. "We can clean up a note here or there, but overall, that's it." Evelyn raised her eyes from her phone. "We'll get the promo rolling right away. Interviews, appearances, social media campaigns. We want the single to hit hard. Lena, I hope you're ready for the spotlight." She nodded, adrenaline coursing through her. Despite her lingering reservations about the changes to the track, there was no denying the sense of accomplishment. This was her first big milestone at Thorn Music Group, a professional single, soon to be unveiled to the world. An hour later, an assistant ushered Lena to a conference room, where Arthur Thorn and a handful of marketing executives waited. They played the track again on high-end speakers, then launched into a discussion about the rollout strategy, dates for radio interviews, morning show appearances, and digital ads flicked across a large screen. Lena's mind spun at the pace of it all. Just a month ago, she'd served lattes at Urban Grind and sang for tips in half-empty bars. Now she was on the cusp of a national release, with a team of professionals strategizing her every move. Part of her felt elated, but a nagging question hovered. Would the audience hear the real Lena Morgan, or simply a marketable version? That evening brought the next surprise. A confirmation she'd been booked on Late Night with Jimmy Fallon alongside Dylan to debut Echoes in the Glass live. The show was barely 3 days away. With the news came an onslaught of rehearsals, band members brought in, choreographed stage lighting planned, and a personal stylist assigned to refine Lena's on-camera look. She barely slept, moving from one practice session to another. Dylan helped her navigate the talk show format, explaining how segments worked and how to handle the host's questions. Finally, the night arrived. Lena stood backstage at the famed studio where Jimmy Fallon filmed, heart pounding in her chest. The stagehands buzzed around, hooking up guitars, adjusting the mic stands. Dylan, who was set to appear in a separate segment, popped over to wish her luck. "You got this," he murmured. "Just do what you've always done. Sing your heart out." A producer gave a signal, and Lena walked onto the stage, greeted by the bright lights and applause from the studio audience. She stepped up to the mic. The band struck the first chords of Echoes in the Glass. Lena inhaled, letting her nerves melt into the melody. She sang with fierce determination, ignoring the cameras, focusing on the core of the song. Maybe it was the adrenaline, or maybe some dormant spark of authenticity fighting its way through, but her voice wove passion into every line. By the time the final chorus soared, the audience roared with approval. When the song ended, Jimmy Fallon hurried over, congratulating her on the performance. She managed a smile, cheeks flushed. As the camera panned across the crowd, she saw Dylan clapping vigorously from the side stage, and even Evelyn, standing near a production monitor, looked genuinely pleased. That night, social media exploded with clips of Lena's debut. She scrolled through endless messages on her phone, breath hitching at the barrage of praise. Some headlines called her the next big thing, while a few critics questioned her pop makeover. But the ratio skewed in her favor. For a moment, triumph overshadowed her doubts. In the back of the chauffeured car taking her home, she let out a trembling exhale. She'd scored her first victory, a successful national TV debut. The euphoria coursed through her veins, but beneath it, she knew an undercurrent of uncertainty still pulsed. Could she keep winning while staying true to herself? Or had she already sacrificed too much? For now, she savored the thrill, hopeful she could strike a balance. The days following her late night with Jimmy Fallon appearance blurred into a whirlwind of media obligations, glowing press releases, and surging sales for her newly released single. Lena's phone buzzed non-stop with interview requests, fan messages, and notifications from industry insiders. Thorn Music Group wasted no time capitalizing on her moment of buzz, scheduling photoshoots and talk radio spots. Yet amid the growing success, a nagging emptiness gnawed at Lena. She felt like a passenger on a speeding train she no longer controlled. Her once intimate songs now belonged to marketing agendas, and she herself had become part of a carefully molded narrative. One afternoon, as she sipped tea in her apartment, a rare break, her phone rang. A wave of relief passed over her when she saw Chloe's name on the screen. "Hey!" Lena answered, trying to sound less weary than she felt. Chloe's enthusiastic voice crackled through the line. "Girl, you were incredible on TV. I watched your performance online about 5 times. I'm so proud of you." Lena allowed herself a genuine smile. "Thanks, Chloe. It feels surreal." "But are you okay?" Chloe pressed, her tone turning serious. "You sound off. Not how I expected you to be after such a huge accomplishment." Lena stared at the blank, tastefully decorated walls of her apartment. "I guess I'm just tired. Everything's happening so fast, and I barely have time to catch my breath. I'm grateful, but it's a lot." Chloe paused on the other end. "What about Mateo? Have you talked to him?" A pang twisted Lena's chest. She realized she hadn't actually spoken to Mateo in weeks. Occasional texts, yes, but no real conversation. "We've been distant. I don't think he approves of what I'm doing. He thinks I'm selling out." "Maybe he's just worried," Chloe offered gently. "He knows how important authenticity is to you." Lena nodded to herself. "I'll reach out. Thanks, Chloe." Later, she tried to call Mateo, only to reach voicemail. She left a message, her voice catching slightly as she said she missed him and hoped they could talk soon. That evening brought another event, a label party, at a swanky rooftop lounge in downtown LA. Lena arrived to find a crowd of polished executives and fellow artists, all congratulating her on the single's early charting success. Arthur Thorne greeted her warmly, introducing her to key players in the industry. Standing by the bar, Dylan joined her, sipping a non-alcoholic cocktail. "Heard your single cracked the top 50 in record time," he said with an approving grin. "Not bad for a nobody from Austin, huh?" She laughed softly. "Feels like a dream." "I just worry about how much of me is left in the music." Dylan's eyes flickered with empathy. "Welcome to my world, but hey, you've done something special here. Don't let the doubt overshadow it. Take the win." Before she could respond, a crowd of label staff swept Lena away for a round of photographs. In each shot, she forced a bright smile, while inside, her heart wrestled with conflicting emotions: elation at her success, fear of losing herself, guilt for abandoning her roots. As the night wore on, she slipped away to a quiet corner of the rooftop. The city sprawled below, headlights weaving like fireflies. She pulled out her phone to check if Mateo had replied, but found nothing. A swirl of loneliness settled in her chest. Out of nowhere, Dylan appeared, leaning against the railing beside her. "You okay?" he asked gently. She let out a shaky breath. "I'm not sure how to handle all this. I know it's what I wanted, but the demands, the constant need to be on, it's getting to me." He offered a sympathetic nod. "The label fosters illusions, and we're part of the show. It can be suffocating." Lena caught his gaze, noticing the quiet yearning that matched her own. She was thankful to have someone who understood. "Thank you," she said, voice barely audible. They stood there in comfortable silence, the hum of the party behind them. At one point, Dylan reached for her hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze before dropping it again, cautious about any appearance that could spark further rumors. The night ended with a swirl of polite goodbyes. In the car ride home, Lena stared out at the neon-lit streets. She was recognized, praised, and climbing the charts, yet her heart felt precariously at risk. Her phone buzzed just as she arrived at her apartment. Mateo missed call. She dialed back immediately, only to get voicemail. A wave of regret washed over her. Despite her achievements, she felt the threads tying her to her old life were fraying. Would there be a place for that honest, soulful Lena if she kept forging ahead in this high-powered world of managed images and fleeting acclaim? She tossed her phone on the couch and buried her face in her hands, forcing herself to breathe. She wasn't sure if she was strong enough to reconcile both versions of herself, but for now, the industry machine demanded her attention, and the next press conference loomed, promising more revelations that would test her resolve. The ornate ballroom at the Chateau Marmont glimmered under chandeliers, its hush broken by the buzz of reporters setting up cameras. Lena sat at a long table at the front of the room, flanked by Arthur Thorne and Evelyn Reed. Dylan Cooper hovered a few chairs away, scrolling through his phone. The label had called this press conference to promote upcoming projects, including Lena's next single and a collaboration with Dylan. The room gradually filled with journalists from music blogs, entertainment magazines, and a few mainstream outlets. Lena felt her pulse quicken. She'd done interviews before, but this was bigger. Televised clips would likely appear everywhere by the evening. Arthur opened with prepared remarks, praising Lena's rapid ascent. He highlighted her raw talent and teased an upcoming star duet that marketing teams had orchestrated. Evelyn followed, emphasizing how Lena's authenticity spoke to a generation craving something real. Lena tried not to flinch at the word authenticity, knowing how much of her image was now manufactured. Then came the Q&A. Cameras clicked and microphones angled forward as reporters took turns. The questions started simple. What's your next single about? How is working with Dylan Cooper? Any tour plans? Lena answered politely, glancing at Arthur for reassurance. Suddenly, a journalist from the LA Chronicle, grey-haired, sharp-eyed, stood up, voice resonating in the gilded hall. He fixed Lena with a direct stare. "Ms. Morgan, I've been researching your background. Are you aware that people are calling your career rise a fairy tale? As in, a poor girl sang in bars for tips, a billionaire producer heard her and was hypnotized. He offered her $1 million contract, but the first clause demanded that she fabricate a relationship and reshape her entire image." A bolt of shock electrified the room. Reporters craned forward, cameras flashing at a frenzy. Evelyn's expression darkened. Arthur's jaw tensed, and he quickly leaned into the microphone, trying to interrupt. "We're here to discuss Lena's music, unfounded rumors." But the journalist pressed on. "Is it true that your contract specifies significant personal image control, including a so-called public relationship with Dylan Cooper?" Lena's stomach lurched, her face draining of color. She'd expected tough questions, but not an outright confrontation about the label's orchestrations. She glanced at Arthur, who nodded for her to maintain composure. The flashes intensified, capturing every flicker of panic across her face. Her mind whirled. If she outright denied it, she'd be lying. If she told the truth, she'd be defying the label. Dylan looked stunned, perhaps realizing this was the moment that could blow their carefully constructed story wide open. Evelyn jumped in, voice icy. "These allegations are baseless. Miss Morgan's contract does include standard image oversight, but that's common in the industry. There is no forced relationship. Dylan and Lena are simply collaborating, both musically and as friends." The reporter refused to back down, eyes flicking pointedly to Lena. "I have sources who claim otherwise. Ms. Morgan, care to comment directly?" Time slowed. Lena could hear her heart pounding. Everything she'd worked for, her promise to the label, her own integrity, collided in a maelstrom of fear. She felt a hot flush creep over her cheeks as words evaded her. Finally, she stammered, My contract, it's—" Arthur squeezed her arm under the table, a silent warning. Lena swallowed, noticing the cameras zoomed in on her trembling lips. She mustered a shaky answer. "I was offered a contract because of my music. The label does oversee image-related matters. That's standard. But I'm still me. I'm not being forced into anything." It was the safest lie she could manage. The reporter opened his mouth to fire another question, but Evelyn quickly declared the Q&A over, ignoring the flurry of raised hands. Security personnel ushered the press out, while a frantic wave of conversation rippled through the crowd. The moment the doors closed, Lena slumped in her seat. Arthur's expression radiated controlled anger. Evelyn muttered something to one of her assistants. Dylan approached, looking rattled, placing a hand on Lena's shoulder. "You okay?" he murmured. She shook her head, voice thick with anxiety. I froze. I didn't expect someone to lay it out like that." Arthur leaned in, his voice low and urgent. "We need to handle this carefully. That kind of question can escalate into a scandal if the tabloids pick it up." Evelyn's clipboard clacked against the table. "We'll issue an immediate statement denying everything. Lena, we'll set up a new interview where you clarify your genuine passion for music and your purely friendly camaraderie with Dylan." Lena locked eyes with Arthur. "But people will keep digging." That reporter's question went viral the second he spoke it. Arthur's tense features softened briefly, revealing a hint of genuine concern. "Trust us to manage the fallout. Your job is to stay composed. No unsanctioned statements, no personal confessions." Still trembling, Lena felt tears threaten to surface. She knew the label demanded her silence, but the truth was out there, swirling in the rumor mill, the literal echo of her life story. A poor girl sang in bars for tips. A billionaire producer heard her, had rung out in a gilded ballroom for all to hear. and she could no longer deny the uneasy weight of her secret. In the days following the press conference, Lena was hounded by headlines. Gossip sites latched onto the reporter's question, spinning stories about her contract clause and fueling speculation that the Dylan Cooper romance was a sham. Though Thorn Music Group's official statement labeled the rumors preposterous, the internet had a voracious appetite for scandal, and articles kept multiplying. Evelyn convened an emergency meeting at Thorn Tower. The conference room brimmed with PR strategists and label attorneys. Lena, seated near the end of the long table, felt a knot in her stomach as they outlined damage control tactics. Arthur presided, quiet but clearly upset at the abrupt leak of trade secrets, as he called it. Hollywood Dirt, a notorious gossip blog, had posted unverified photos of Dylan Cooper seemingly getting cozy with another artist at a private party. The blog implied Dylan had no real romantic interest in Lena. The pictures threatened to blow open the entire facade the label painstakingly built. "Absolutely unacceptable," Evelyn fumed, flipping through printed screenshots of the blog's coverage. "They're not only questioning Dylan's involvement, but also painting Lena as a puppet. We need to squash this." One of the attorneys tapped a folder. "We can file defamation claims if they refuse to retract. But it's a messy process. The evidence might not be strong enough for a legal win." Arthur looked at Lena. "We're prepared to go on the offensive, but we need your cooperation. If you confirm to the press that these are just vicious rumors, you'll salvage the brand image. But if you so much as hint that this relationship was staged, we could face a PR disaster, not to mention a contractual breach." Lena's throat felt tight. She was painfully aware of the clause that penalized her for publicly defying the label's image strategy. "You want me to outright lie? Dylan is obviously—" Evelyn cut in, tone icy. "We want you to do what's best for your own career. A denial is the simplest route. As far as the public is concerned, you and Dylan are simply taking a break from the spotlight while you both focus on music." She bristled at the manipulation. Dylan cast her a rueful glance. "I'm sorry," he murmured, not meeting her eyes. The label's crisis escalated quickly over the next 24 hours. Social media erupted with fake couple speculation, accompanied by memes mocking the entire situation. Paparazzi hounded Lena at her apartment building, camera flashes popping whenever she stepped outside. Matteo called her that evening, his voice tight with concern. "I saw the headlines. Are you okay?" Tears pricked at her eyes. "Not really. I feel trapped. They want me to deny everything." He sighed. "I was afraid this would happen. This is exactly what I warned you about, the label controlling your life for profit. You have to remember who you are, Lena." She swallowed hard, guilt coating her voice. "I know, I'm sorry for drifting away. I can't see a clean way out of this." They spoke for a few more minutes, the conversation tense but laced with affection. Hanging up, Lena felt a flicker of relief that Matteo still cared, yet the larger problem loomed: how to handle the label's demands. The next morning, Evelyn summoned Lena to a secluded lounge in Thorn Tower. Arthur was already there, seated near a window. His usual composure looked slightly frayed. "Sit," he said quietly, gesturing to a chair opposite him. "We have to get ahead of this story. The board is livid that we're the subject of gossip column fodder rather than positive press." Lena's gaze dropped to her lap. "I can't keep lying publicly. It's bad enough we're staging everything." Arthur leaned forward, voice hushed yet intense. "Lena, if this escalates, the contract's morality clauses kick in. You could lose the entire deal, every cent, plus potential damages. That's how these contracts are written. You agreed to it when you signed." A lump formed in her throat. She forced herself to meet his gaze. "So you're threatening me?" "It's not a threat," Arthur replied. eyes flicking with frustration. "It's a reality. I believed in your talent. I still do. But you have to play the game enough to protect yourself. A public meltdown hurts us all, especially you." Evelyn stepped closer, arms folded. "We've arranged an interview tomorrow. You'll firmly deny any rumor of a fake relationship. You'll claim the photos of Dylan were taken out of context and that your focus now is purely on music. The label expects your full cooperation." An urge to rebel flared in Lena, but the memory of rent due, the bills from the past she'd barely escaped, and the contract's looming financial consequences crushed that impulse. She clenched her jaw, feeling tears threaten to rise. "Fine," she whispered, hating the helplessness in her tone. Arthur exhaled a quiet relief. "Good, let's get through this, and we'll steady the ship." Evelyn's face softened marginally. "You're doing the right thing for your career. Keep that in mind." As Lena left Thorn Tower, she felt her chest constrict with an ache she could no longer ignore. She'd compromised before, but never this blatantly. The scandal, the tabloids, the label's demands, it all underscored the price of her success. In the back of her mind, a small voice whispered that she might soon have to choose between the career she'd always dreamed of and the integrity she'd fought so hard to keep. Lena sat on the floor of her apartment, surrounded by scattered lyric sheets and the faint hum of traffic from outside her window. She hadn't moved much in the last few hours, caught in a spiral of dread. Her interview was scheduled in less than a day, a high-pressure session arranged to deny the blog rumors. Thorn Music Group insisted it was essential if she hoped to salvage her reputation. Her thoughts drifted to the nights at the Midnight Roar, when her music had been a refuge. Now, that refuge felt compromised, tainted by half-truths and corporate demands. She reached for her phone, tempted to call Chloe or Mateo, but hesitated. Chloe would offer encouragement she wasn't sure she deserved, and Mateo would voice the same warning: "You're letting them control your life." Eventually, she dialed Dylan's number. He picked up on the third ring, voice groggy, as if she'd woken him from a nap. "Hey," he murmured, "I was about to call you." Lena swallowed, curling her free hand into a fist. "Tomorrow's interview. Do you know what you're going to say?" A pause crackled over the line. "I'll deny the blog story. That's what Evelyn wants. But it feels horrible, right? We're both telling the world some rehearsed line when there's more to it." She stared at a crumpled lyric sheet, a half-finished song about losing oneself in the noise. "Yeah, I hate this, but if we don't play along, the label might tear us apart. You saw Arthur's reaction in that meeting." "Don't remind me." Dylan let out a heavy sigh. "I wish there was a way to fix all of this without lying again." A silence settled, both of them weighed down by the same moral compromise. Finally, Dylan cleared his throat. "Look, let's get through tomorrow, then figure out how to regain control. I'm not sure how, but maybe we can find a crack in the system." She murmured agreement, knowing it was only a partial salve. After they hung up, she lay on her back, guitar resting beside her. Usually, music gave her comfort, but now the words refused to come. She felt trapped in a cage of her own making. The next morning, she arrived at the TV station for the scheduled interview. A few eager fans hovered outside, some holding signs with her name. Despite the tightness in her chest, she forced a smile and waved, mindful that paparazzi might be snapping pictures at any moment. Inside, a production assistant ushered her to a makeup chair. Bright lights glared down, and she caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror, tired eyes, tension creasing her brow. Evelyn hovered nearby, firing off last-minute reminders. "Stay composed. Keep it simple. Deny the rumors and shift the conversation back to your music." Dylan joined them a few minutes later, looking equally strained. His usual confident swagger felt muted, as though he too was caught in an undertow. When the show's host came to greet them, her energy was warm and welcoming, but Lena noticed the flicker of curiosity in the woman's eyes. Clearly, she smelled scandal. At the interview table, cameras rolled. The host started light, praising Lena's rise and Dylan's chart success. They bantered for a moment, discussing music and their friendship, but soon enough the question arrived. There's been talk online that your relationship is staged, or that Dylan might be seeing someone else on the side. Can you address that? Lena's stomach clenched. She saw Dylan's hand twitch on his lap. They both glanced at each other. Then Lena cleared her throat. Those rumors. Her voice wavered momentarily. She took a quick breath. They're just that, rumors. Dylan and I have been working closely, but we've never claimed we're anything more than good friends and collaborators. The host turned to Dylan. So there's no hidden romance? He shook his head with a practiced smile. No, we support each other's careers, that's all. There's no big conspiracy. Lena recognized the forced grin curling his lips. The host, unsatisfied, pressed further. What about the photos of Dylan at a party with someone else? People say that proves the whole arrangement with Lena is fake. She felt a flash of heat in her chest. Could she keep up the facade? She must. Dylan's allowed a personal life, she managed, voice sounding robotic even to her own ears. We don't owe anyone an explanation of every photo. The host nodded, a glimmer of skepticism still present. All right, fair enough. She pivoted to a new topic, praising Lena's new single. The weight on Lena's shoulders lifted marginally, but she couldn't ignore the sick feeling in her gut. Once off camera, Evelyn rushed in, exhaling relief. You did well. That'll tamp down the gossip. Arthur texted soon after. Good job. Stand by for next steps. Dylan quietly slipped out. Lena wanted to run after him, but cameras still lurked in the corridor. Instead, she forced herself to chat politely with a few staff members, waiting until it was safe to leave without being mobbed. Back in the black SUV, she felt raw and hollow. This was the closest she'd come to flat-out lying to the public, and it cut deep. She thought about how easy it had been to let the label spin her story, how quickly she'd stumbled into an empty script. At her apartment, she sank onto the couch. Several messages awaited on her phone, friends congratulating her for handling the drama, fans praising her calm demeanor. They had no clue how frayed she felt. Slipping out onto her small balcony, Lena stared at the LA skyline, its gleaming lights a cruel reminder of promises that had led her here. She shut her eyes and hummed a melody she'd been toying with, a haunting tune about illusions and silent screams. The notes wavered, but they were hers. For a moment, she clung to that lonely piece of truth, uncertain if it would be enough to carry her through the storm she sensed brewing on the horizon. In the days following the interview, Lena withdrew from much of the social world that Thorn Music Group orchestrated. She used the excuse of exhaustion to decline a few networking events and brand partnership meetings. Even so, she knew she couldn't hide forever. The label had invested too much in her success to let her slip away unnoticed. Her quiet rebellion started small. Each morning, instead of rolling into the sound factory right away, she'd carve out an hour to write music privately. Nothing polished or radio-friendly, just raw lines that captured her confusion and guilt. She found herself pouring heartbreak into verses about surrender and regret, weaving in chord progressions that bristled with longing. The difference was, she wrote these new songs in a notebook she kept hidden in her guitar case, far from the eyes of producers who might soften them into commercial pop. For Lena, it felt like reclaiming a part of herself she'd nearly lost. One afternoon, Matteo surprised her with a call. His familiar voice washed over her like a balm. "Lena, hey, I'm in LA." She nearly dropped her phone. "You're here? Why didn't you tell me sooner?" A note of sheepishness crept into his tone. "I wasn't sure you'd want to see me. Things have been tense. But I have a friend out here who offered me a gig, so I figured I'd see what's happening. Are you free?" Her heart pounded. She was torn between relief at having someone from her old life nearby and fear of how that might clash with her new world. But her longing for authenticity won out. "Absolutely. Let's meet." They arranged to meet at a small indie cafe tucked away in Silver Lake. Lena wore a baseball cap and dark sunglasses to avoid being recognized, though inside the clientele seemed too absorbed in their laptops and conversations to notice her. Mateo was at a corner table with his guitar case leaning against the wall. When she saw him, a wave of emotion crashed over her. He looked the same, tall and lean, hair pulled back, but there was a guardedness in his eyes. Still, the moment she slipped into the seat across from him, relief mingled with the sadness of how distant they'd become. They sipped iced coffee in awkward silence before Mateo finally spoke. "I saw that interview. It felt, forced." She sighed. "It was. I hate the lies, but the label made it clear I'd be finished if I told the truth." He nodded, gaze fixed on her face. "You're not the same Lena I remember, but maybe that's just part of growing up. I just worry about you. Is all this worth it?" Her throat tightened. "I don't know anymore. I reached a level I always dreamed of, but I can barely recognize my reflection these days." They talked for over an hour, Lena detailing the staged relationship drama, the controlling clauses in her contract, and the daily conflict between her raw musical instincts and the polished persona the label demanded. Mateo listened patiently, occasionally shaking his head in dismay. Finally, he placed a hand on hers. "Look, you got a talent that can move hearts. Don't let them bury it under glossy production and photo ops. Is there a way to reclaim your sound while still riding this wave?" She blinked back tears. "I've started writing again, just for myself. If the label found out, they'd probably say it's too edgy or unmarketable. But it feels more real than anything I've recorded lately." Mateo managed a small smile. "That's a start. Let's jam sometime, like old times. Maybe we can figure out how to blend your new platform with the authentic Lena." Her phone buzzed just then. Evelyn's number flashed on the screen. Likely another urgent text about an upcoming event. She silenced it, not ready to slip back into that persona. After they parted ways, Lena felt a flicker of renewed courage. Mateos's belief in her reminded her she wasn't entirely trapped. For the rest of the afternoon, she carried that spark of hope. Back at her apartment, she opened her hidden notebook, adding a new verse inspired by their conversation. She sang it softly, letting the chords ring true in the quiet space. The lyrics spoke of self-forgiveness and stepping out of one's shadow. A tingle ran through her, the same tingle she used to feel back in Austin when a fresh lyric sprang to life. Yet the label machine would not slow. The next morning, a flurry of emails awaited her, an important meeting with Arthur, final touches for a red carpet event, and more discussions about her forthcoming album. Her single might still be on the charts, but they wanted more momentum. Gathering her resolve, Lena slipped on a jacket and headed to Thorn Tower. If she was going to keep going, she needed to hold on to the small pieces of her identity that still burned bright. Mateo's words echoed in her head, "Don't let them bury your voice." Staring at her own reflection in the polished elevator walls, she whispered under her breath, "You are still you. Remember that." The doors slid open, and she stepped out, heart pounding with the resolve to protect the fragile seed of authenticity she'd begun to rediscover. Arthur Thorne's office occupied a top floor of the Thorne Tower, with glass walls offering a dizzying view of Los Angeles below. The decor was sleek and modern, leather chairs, abstract art, a massive desk that seemed more for show than work. Lena stood near the large window, arms folded, while Arthur finished a phone call. "Apologies," he said, hanging up. "We're finalizing a promotional deal for you with a major clothing brand. It could bring considerable visibility." Lena forced a polite nod. Another brand deal meant more photo shoots, more scripts to memorize, another step away from the gritty authenticity she yearned for. Arthur gestured for her to sit on a pristine white sofa, then took a seat in a matching chair. "I've noticed you've been a bit withdrawn lately, missing some social events. Everything okay?" She weighed her answer carefully. "I'm overwhelmed, if I'm honest. The pace, the constant media spin, it's taking a toll." His expression remained controlled, but a flicker of concern crossed his eyes. "We're so close to releasing the album. This is a crucial moment. The more we push now, the more success you'll enjoy later." Lena sighed, glancing at her hands. "Success, yes, but at what cost? I barely have time to compose my own songs anymore, and after the scandal, I feel like the public sees me as some fabrication." Arthur clasped his hands. "The scandal will die down. The upcoming awards show performance will shift focus to your music again. I've arranged for you to open a set at the VMAs. That's prime exposure." She blinked in surprise. "The VMAs? I mean, that's huge, but I'm not sure I'm ready to step onto that stage amid all this chaos." "Trust me, it'll be a game changer," Arthur replied, voice firm. "We just have to control the narrative. Evelyn is coordinating the PR side. As for your music, we'll rely on the best producers to ensure a show-stopping performance." Her pulse quickened. The VMAs were a dream for any up-and-coming artist. Yet the idea of performing there under so many constraints only magnified her internal conflict. Could she stand on that stage, singing the label's version of her truth, and still hold on to any shred of integrity? Arthur seemed to sense her hesitation. "Look, Lena, I know you value your art deeply. It's one of the reasons I signed you in the first place. But understand that my role, and by extension, the labels, is to guide you toward a sustainable career. Sometimes that means bending, even if it feels like you're breaking." Her eyes stung with unshed tears. "It feels more like I'm betraying who I am." He leaned forward, dropping the executive veneer for a moment. "I once had an artist who refused every bit of industry guidance. He insisted on total creative freedom. The album bombed, and he never recovered. I don't want you to share that fate." She remembered Dylan's story about being shaped into a pop star to stay afloat. How many others had lost their essence to the label's demands? She breathed out slowly. "I understand. But I need a moment to remember why I sing in the first place. I can't keep running on empty." Arthur nodded curtly. "Take a day if you need it, but be prepared to rehearse for the VMAs starting next week. We want your performance to overshadow any lingering rumors." Lena left the office with her thoughts churning. The VMAs, a chance to shine or a final push into an image she hardly recognized. She was still mulling it over when, later that evening, she met Dylan for a quick studio jam. She found him alone in Studio 2, strumming a mellow melody on an acoustic guitar. He lifted his head when she entered, offering a half smile. "Hey, thought it was time we actually made music without an audience telling us what to play." She settled beside him, retrieving her own guitar from a stand. For a few minutes, they improvised quietly, letting chord progressions unravel. There were no cameras, no demands, just two artists sharing a moment of genuine expression. When they paused, Dylan lowered his guitar. "I heard about the VMAs. They want you and me to do something together, right? A manufactured couple performance, no doubt." Lena grimaced. "That's the plan. The label wants to reassert that we're still a cohesive front, but I'm so tired of the pretense." He nodded, a resigned sadness clouding his features. "It's messed up. The whole system thrives on illusions." But you might also see it as a platform, maybe a way to show a glimpse of who you really are, even if the label wants a certain script. Hope flickered in her chest. You think I could tweak the performance to be more authentic? Dylan shrugged. I've learned that small acts of rebellion can resonate, a subtle lyric change, a raw vocal run they didn't expect. Stuff like that. It might be risky, but maybe it's worth it. Audiences pick up on sincerity, even in a sea of spectacle. She considered his words, recalling how she once felt unstoppable singing in that smoky bar in Austin. Maybe I do need to show them my real voice, if only for a moment. They played a few more chords, quietly discovering a shared synergy beyond the forced rumors. By the end of the session, Lena felt a renewed sense of determination. The VMAs loomed as a high-stakes event, but maybe it could also be her chance to break free, even if it risked everything she'd worked for. Stepping out into the nighttime air, guitar in hand, she whispered to herself, I won't let them bury my music anymore. She felt the scars of past compromises, but they also fueled her with a resolve to stand firm, no matter how the industry might retaliate. A week later, the VMAs were just days away, and Lena threw herself into rehearsals with dogged resolve. She could feel the tension in the label's corridors. The entire team viewed this performance as a defining moment. Media buzz had mostly shifted from her scandal to excitement about her next move, but the pressure felt immense. In the bright lights of the Thorn Music Group rehearsal stage, she practiced with a live band. Evelyn flitted around, issuing notes on wardrobe changes, while producers insisted on choreographed moves for a visually compelling act. Dylan was scheduled to join for the final portion of her set, culminating in a glossy, camera-ready tableau. But Lena had a plan. She'd spent late nights with Matteo, clandestinely polishing an alternate arrangement. Instead of letting the band overshadow her raw vocals, she'd requested a stripped-down segment. The label grudgingly agreed to a brief acoustic intro before the bigger pop flourish, assuming it was just a standard dramatic build. They didn't realize how much she intended to reveal in those few acoustic bars. One evening after rehearsal, she retreated to the small acoustic room with Matteo. The walls were lined with soundproofing, the overhead lamp creating a warm pool of light. She quietly showed him a new chord progression she'd been working on, a snippet from a song that combined the soulful heartbreak of her earlier writing with a subtle lyrical nod to her struggles in LA. Matteo frowned. If you sing this, it'll be a direct challenge to the label narrative, you know. She met his gaze, unwavering. I know, but if I'm going down singing my truth, at least for a minute. He nodded, strumming along with her. The gentle melody filled the tight space, weaving defiance with longing. When they finished, her heart pounded. It felt right, dangerous, but right. On the day before the VMAs, Thorn Music Group hosted a final dress rehearsal in the arena where the awards would take place. Neon lights pulsed across the stage, cameras zoomed around on cranes, and a scattered group of staff sat in the seats, taking notes on every detail. Dylan joined Lena backstage, wearing a stylish leather jacket, his hair meticulously styled. She glanced at him, murmuring, "Ready?" He nodded, expression taut. "Let's do this. But, you know, if you're going to alter anything, it's all on you. I won't stop you, but I can't intervene either. The label would pin me as complicit." A pang of guilt struck her. "I understand. I don't want to drag you into any fallout. Thank you for standing by me as much as you can." He gripped her shoulder briefly. "Just be careful." Up on stage, Lena ran through the official set. The first verse in acoustic form, then the band would explode into the pop arrangement. Toward the end, Dylan would appear, microphone in hand, feeding into the romantic synergy rumor the label still wanted to maintain. Arthur stood in the middle of the empty seats, arms folded, nodding occasionally. Evelyn hovered by his side. Lena spotted their half-smiles whenever the fireworks and confetti cannons went off on cue. The spectacle was undeniable, exactly what award show audiences loved. After the run-through, they gathered for final notes. Evelyn tapped her tablet. That acoustic intro is 40 seconds, correct? Let's not linger. We need the big entrance for maximum impact. Lena feigned agreement. Yes, 40 seconds. Understood. Arthur patted her shoulder, a rare show of warmth. Tomorrow's your night. Make it count. We'll bury any lingering scandal in that standing ovation. She forced a smile, ignoring the gnawing feeling in her gut. Tomorrow's performance was either going to catapult her further into stardom or destroy her standing with the label. Possibly both. That evening, Lena found a moment of quiet on her balcony, phone in hand, uncertain whether to call Chloe or remain alone with her nerves. She dialed Chloe eventually. Her friend's bright voice offered immediate comfort. I saw a preview of the stage set up online, Chloe gushed. It looks massive. Are you freaking out? Lena huffed a wry laugh. Kind of. It's the biggest stage I've ever stood on. I'm worried about messing up, about letting the label down, about losing myself. All of it, really. Chloe's tone softened. Listen, you've come this far. Do what feels right, even if that means taking a risk. People connect with honesty, Lena. That's why I've always loved your voice. It's honest. Her eyes burned with tears. Thanks, Chloe. I'm going to try. They ended the call, and Lena sat there, letting the cool night breeze wash over her. She thought of how she'd dreamt of a moment like this all her life, a moment to stand in front of the world and pour her heart out. Yet she'd never imagined it wrapped in so much artifice. Down on the streets below, headlights glowed in a steady stream. In some distant apartment or bar, maybe another young singer was playing her guitar, hoping to be discovered. Lena felt both envy and empathy. Envy for the naive freedom that Singer might still have, and empathy for the hardship that would inevitably test her. She held her guitar close, stroking its worn wood. Tomorrow, she decided, she would let her truth ring, if only for seconds. She owed it to herself, to the girl who once sang for spare change. Even if it upended everything, she couldn't walk away without trying. The morning of the VMAs dawned with a tense sky, clouds hinting at rain in a city famed for its sunshine. Lena woke early, heart thrumming in anticipation. The label had arranged a stylist and makeup artist to prep her in a private suite near the arena. They brushed and pinned and painted, transforming her into a glamorous vision, yet she felt strangely detached from her own reflection. Evelyn arrived mid-morning with a garment bag. Here's your final outfit for tonight. Compliments of Vivian Chen, plus a few label tweaks. We want you looking iconic. Curious, Lena unzipped the bag. Inside hung a sleek jumpsuit, black with subtle sparkles that caught the light. It was bold, yet elegant, surprisingly close to something Lena might have chosen herself. She murmured thanks, feeling a trace of gratitude for Vivian's persistent efforts to preserve bits of her individuality. By afternoon, she made her way to the arena for a final sound check. Paparazzi lined the streets, but security whisked her inside before she could answer any shouted questions. The atmosphere backstage was electric, dancers, artists, crew members bustling about, finalizing every cue. Her first order of business was a meeting with Arthur and an anxious record executive from the Thorn Music Group board. They stood near a cluster of road cases, scanning laptops and schedules. Arthur eyed Lena's outfit and nodded approval. You look ready for the big night, she offered a tight smile. Let's hope so. The executive flipped through documents. "We want to confirm the final version of your set. Acoustic intro, followed by the main pop arrangement. Then Dylan appears for the last verse. Confetti, pyro, done. Are we all aligned?" Lena swallowed. "Yes, that's the structure." "Good," Arthur said, glancing at his watch. "Keep it polished. We'll have the entire audience and millions watching from home, judging every note." He and the executive rushed off, leaving Lena in a swirl of stagehands. She clutched her guitar case, chest tight with anticipation. A few hours later, the VMA's red carpet glowed under flashing cameras. Lena stepped onto it in her black jumpsuit, carefully holding a polished confidence. Journalists yelled her name, snapping photos. She braced herself for the usual questions about Dylan, but they mostly asked about her upcoming performance. That gave her a flicker of relief. At least the spotlight had shifted back to her music. Inside, the show kicked off with high-energy acts. Seated in the artist section, Lena exchanged tense smiles with Dylan. The time for her set approached quickly, and stage managers ushered her backstage, hooking up her in-ear monitors and giving last-minute instructions. She could hear the MC's voice booming over the arena's PA system. "Please welcome the rising star who's taken the charts by storm, Lena Morgan." A deep breath steadied her. Clutching her acoustic guitar, she stepped onto the stage alone, spotlights converging on her figure. The arena's roar faded into a hushed anticipation as the house lights dimmed. She began strumming, the acoustic intro echoing through the massive venue. Her voice trembled at first, but then settled into a heartfelt resonance. This was her planned 40 seconds, but she'd decided to add a twist. Midway, she shifted chords into the bare-bones progression she'd rehearsed secretly with Matteo. Time seemed to slow. She sang a raw verse, a plea for authenticity amid illusions, not part of the official pop track. The audience, uncertain, quieted further, as though sensing something genuine was surfacing in a show so often drenched in spectacle. Backstage, she glimpsed frantic movement, producers mouthing, "What is she doing?" But Lena pressed on, letting her voice crack with raw emotion. For those few extra moments, it was just her and the truth she'd been hiding. Then, with a decisive strum, she segued into the label-approved arrangement. The band kicked in, lights flared, and the stage exploded in color. Dylan emerged right on cue for the final verse, stepping beside her with a grin that held equal parts camaraderie and awe. The crowd erupted in cheers. As they hit the last note, confetti rained down, and pyro ignited at the stage's edges. Lena raised her arms, panting with exertion, heart pounding at what she'd just done. She caught Arthur's tense stare from the front row. Evelyn looked stunned. Yet the crowd was on its feet. Adrenaline surged. Despite the tightness in her chest from defying the label's script, a wave of liberation washed over her. She delivered the pop anthem they wanted, but not before offering a brief, unfiltered glimpse of her own soul. The host rushed on stage, praising the performance, while cameras flashed. Dylan leaned in to speak over the noise. "You did it?" She swallowed hard, a tear threatening to spill. "I had to." As they stepped backstage, the corridor buzzed with chaotic energy. Some staff members wore confused expressions, but others looked outright inspired by her bold move. Lena knew there would be consequences. Arthur's reaction alone promised conflict, but for now, she reveled in the crowd's roar reverberating through the arena walls. She'd risked everything to be true to herself, even if only for a sliver of time. Perhaps that small act of honesty would prove to be the turning point she so desperately needed. The roar of applause still echoed in Lena's ears as she stood backstage at the VMAs, her chest heaving with a mix of adrenaline and nerves. Stagehands rushed around packing up equipment, while a swirling chaos of producers, fellow performers, and managers crowded the corridors. Confetti clung to her hair, and her black jumpsuit shimmered under the fluorescent backstage lights, still charged from the pyro that had lit up her set. She clutched her acoustic guitar tight, half expecting someone from Thorn Music Group to stride over and demand an explanation for her unscripted verse. Instead, the first person who approached her was Dylan, weaving past a group of dancers in sequined outfits. His face glowed with a mix of awe and lingering shock. "That was unexpected," he said breathlessly, voice low so as not to be overheard. "You changed the arrangement. I saw the panic in the producer's eyes." Lena's pulse pounded, but she managed a nod. "I had to. I couldn't stand on that stage and give them only the polished version. If this is my big moment, I wanted at least a glimpse of who I really am." A small, understanding smile tugged at Dylan's lips. "Well, you pulled it off." The crowd loved it. Social media is going to explode about that acoustic verse. Just be prepared for blowback from the label. Before she could reply, a flustered assistant waved a clipboard. "They want you both for an interview, right now." She gestured toward a makeshift press area, sectioned off by black curtains. Beyond it, cameras and reporters gathered in a tight semicircle, waiting. With a shared look of resigned determination, Dylan and Lena navigated the hallway. As they slipped behind the curtains, they encountered swirling camera flashes and a barrage of shouted questions. A tall reporter from a popular music channel managed to speak over the clamor. "Lena, that performance was an absolute showstopper. What was the inspiration for that stripped-down opening? We weren't expecting it." Lena's stomach fluttered with nerves, but she forced a steady tone. "I've always believed music should be honest. The acoustic moment was a way to connect with the audience. Just me, my guitar, and the truth behind the song." Dylan chimed in, offering a supportive nod. "She's got guts, right? That's why people are drawn to her. It's not just about the glitz." Sensing the subtle friction in the air, a second journalist pushed forward. "Lena, your first verse sounded very personal, like a cry for authenticity. Are you sending a message about how the industry shapes artists?" A beat of tension crackled. She could almost sense Evelyn Reed or Arthur Thorne lurking nearby, ready to pounce if she said the wrong thing. Still, Lena chose her words with care. "I think every artist struggles with balancing authenticity and what the industry demands. Tonight, I just wanted to show that balance can exist, even if it's only for a moment." The flashing cameras captured her answer, and the crowd of journalists murmured with intrigue. Dylan smoothly steered the conversation back to the single they'd performed together, praising the positive response. The official interview ended on a bright note, and the press area shifted focus to the next celebrities filtering in. Exiting the press pit, Lena exhaled in relief, only to spot Arthur Thorne standing near a production crate, arms crossed, face unreadable. He waited until she was a few steps away before addressing her. "That was quite a surprise," he said, voice low enough that only she could hear. "We agreed on a 40-second acoustic intro, not an entirely new verse." Her heart kicked up. She braced for anger, but his tone, while terse, wasn't explosive. "I know. I'm sorry for going off script, but I felt I had to show more of myself. The audience deserves something real." Arthur's gaze flicked to the stage behind her, where the next act was setting up. "You realize you blindsided us. My phone is already blowing up with questions about the altered arrangement." He paused, exhaling a sharp breath. "Yet the audience reaction was huge. The label board might be upset, but the fans loved it." His last words carried a reluctant note of admiration. Lena sensed a small door opening, a crack in the formidable wall of Thorn Music Group's strategy. "So, are you furious?" she asked hesitantly. Arthur pressed his lips into a thin line, then answered quietly, "I'm not pleased with surprises, but I can't deny the result. We'll have a conversation soon about how this fits into your overall direction." Without another word, he turned and strode off, phone buzzing in hand. Dylan, lingering a few steps behind, watched Arthur's exit. "That's probably the best reaction you could have hoped for," he remarked. "He didn't chew you out in front of everyone." Nodding, Lena let the adrenaline of the night begin to fade. For so long, she'd obeyed every label directive, terrified of losing her shot. But this was her moment of transformation, performed not just in front of millions, but for herself. She'd glimpsed the power in asserting her own voice. Even if the industry machine pushed back, she now knew how it felt to stand firm, even for a brief, shining verse. Her phone pinged. A text from Mateo read, "I knew you had it in you, proud of you." She couldn't help the grin that spread across her face. Despite the uncertain fallout, she felt an exhilarating sense of relief. For once, she'd been her own artist on stage, not just a vessel for polished marketing. Looking at the swirl of lights and celebrity chaos around her, Lena realized that this single, rebellious step had already changed her trajectory. Where it led, she wasn't entirely sure, but the curtain had lifted, on stage and within her, and she felt ready to face whatever consequence or opportunity might follow. 4 days after the VMAs, Lena hopped off a plane in Austin, Texas, guitar case in hand. The swirling energy of that fateful performance still lingered in her mind, but she yearned for something familiar, soil where her roots ran deep. Thorn Music Group's PR team had begrudgingly approved a short trip home, especially once they realized the media buzz around her surprise verse was actually stoking interest in her brand. A visit to her hometown felt like another media win, a triumphant return for the girl who made it big. But for Lena, this journey wasn't about optics. She needed to reconnect with the place where she first fell in love with music, the place that held her earliest dreams. Outside the airport, the Texas sun blazed, and she inhaled a lungful of dry heat. No LA haze here, just the raw brightness of a southern sky. A rideshare dropped her in front of the Midnight Roar, the bar that had once felt like the edge of her world. The neon sign was still missing a few letters, and the paint on the front door peeled in a familiar way. A wave of nostalgia and fondness washed over her. She stepped inside, squinting to let her eyes adjust to the dimness. Mid-afternoon, the place was nearly empty. Vince, the bar owner, glanced up from wiping tables and nearly dropped his cloth. "Lena Morgan, well, heard you were lighting up TV screens lately." A shy laugh escaped her. "Guess so. Thought I'd stop by, see how you've been." He smirked, setting the cloth aside. "You come to grace us with a song or two. Or is that beneath you now that you're a charting artist?" She stepped forward, placing her guitar on a table. "Nothing's beneath me. This place made me who I am." She could have mentioned all the turmoil swirling inside her, but she kept it simple. The look in Vince's eyes softened a fraction. As they chatted, a handful of regulars trickled in. Word spread fast that Lena Morgan was back, and soon a small cluster of curious faces turned her way. She felt the warmth of familiarity, the hush of real interest untainted by paparazzi or label orchestrations. "Maybe I'll play a quick set later," Lena offered. Vince nodded eagerly. "Yeah, sure thing. I won't advertise it too big, don't want to crowd you, but I bet a few folks would appreciate hearing you again." She smiled in gratitude, feeling lighter than she had in months. That evening, she had dinner with Chloe at an old diner they both loved, over plates of chicken-fried steak and mashed potatoes. They caught up. Chloe beamed with pride, recounting how half the baristas at Urban Grind had watched Lena's VMA performance on their phones during break. "People were cheering in the cafe, can you believe it? I nearly burst with excitement." Lena's cheeks warmed. "Thanks for always being in my corner. I really needed to come back and remember what it feels like to be just me." Chloe sipped her iced tea. "How are you handling the label's reaction to your improv verse?" The press made it sound like a bold statement. A knot formed in Lena's stomach at the reminder. Arthur wasn't thrilled, but the performance boosted my profile. The labels torn between disciplining me and capitalizing on the hype. I feel caught in the middle. Chloe set down her cup, compassion in her gaze. Maybe that's your leverage. If the fans love it, the label might realize your authenticity is an asset, not a liability. Leaning back, Lena let that idea settle. I hope so. I'm done being just a packaged product. If they can't handle that, maybe it's time I figure out another path. They finished the meal in thoughtful silence, then parted with a tight hug outside the diner. Later that night, Lena walked back into the midnight roar, heart pounding at the sight of the tiny stage she'd once occupied so often. A modest crowd had gathered, locals who recalled her smoky-voiced sets. Vince motioned her forward, and she climbed onto the platform. Her guitar felt both foreign and achingly familiar in her hands. No cameras, no stylists, no label execs, just her and the mic. She cleared her throat, scanning the faces in the dim light. She recognized a few from the old days, a couple who often requested her saddest ballads, a middle-aged woman who used to slip her extra tips. She murmured, "It's been a while, y'all," and plucked the opening chords of a song she'd written at 17 about a restless night under Texas stars. As her voice filled the bar, time seemed to collapse. She sang with abandon, not worrying about pitch-perfect runs or commercial appeal. The crowd swayed, caught in the raw vulnerability of the music. Halfway through, she felt tears prick the corners of her eyes, realizing how much she missed this unfiltered connection. When she finished, applause broke out, not raucous like a stadium crowd, but warm and genuine. She offered a shaky laugh. "Thank you," she breathed into the mic. "You have no idea how good it is to be home." After a couple more songs, she hopped off stage, greeted by hugs and handshakes. The sense of belonging, of realness, suffused every conversation. Several folks mentioned the VMA performance, praising her raw acoustic moment. "That's the Lena we know," one said, eyes shining. Stepping outside afterward, she inhaled Austin's thick night air, guitar case slung over her shoulder. Street lamps cast warm halos on the sidewalk. The city's quiet vibrancy reminded her that fame might be fleeting, but home would always anchor her. For the first time in a long while, she felt both the weight of her journey and the solace of having a place to return to. She stood there a moment longer, letting the knowledge settle. Her roots ran deep here, and no matter how big the world beyond might get, she could always reclaim her authenticity under these familiar Texas skies. 2 days after her unplanned mini-concert at the Midnight Roar, Lena boarded a plane back to Los Angeles. This time, though, she carried an unshakable peace in her chest. Austin had reminded her who she was before contracts and bright lights overshadowed her world. Now, she planned to carry that clarity into the heart of Thorn Music Group. Her phone buzzed as soon as she landed at LAX. Rory, the young assistant at the sound factory, had sent her a string of texts. "Arthur scheduled a meeting with you. Something about a new direction. He's in an intense mood." Lena exhaled a slow breath. It might be a showdown about her surprise verse at the VMAs, or perhaps a chance to renegotiate. Either way, she wouldn't cower. She'd tasted creative freedom again in Austin, and there was no going back. She arrived at Thorn Tower that same afternoon. The receptionist directed her to a newly refurbished conference room on a high floor. Glass walls offered a sweeping view of the city, tinted by the late-day sun. The room was furnished with sleek chairs around an oval table, and at one end stood a tall digital display showing her name in bold letters, Lena Morgan, Future Projects. Inside, Arthur Thorne and Evelyn Reed waited, along with a couple of marketing executives who eyed Lena with varying degrees of curiosity. Arthur gestured for her to sit. His demeanor was calm, yet unreadable. "We have a lot to discuss," he began. "Your VMA performance generated massive public interest. Downloads of your single spiked. The label's analytics team says you've become a symbol of authentic artistry almost overnight." Lena raised an eyebrow. "And how does the label feel about that?" She expected a stern reprimand, but Arthur surprised her. "We can't ignore the results," he said, leaning back in his chair. "It appears your willingness to show vulnerability resonates with listeners, especially after the staged rumor fiasco. We're pivoting our strategy." Evelyn tapped her tablet. "We propose rebranding your upcoming album campaign around authenticity. Instead of the pop-centric image we planned, we'll let you incorporate more of your acoustic, raw style." A pulse of cautious excitement sparked in Lena's chest. "That's exactly what I wanted all along, but I have conditions." Arthur nodded, arching a brow. "Name them." Her heart thumped. She wasn't used to holding the reins, but the memory of her tears in Austin pushed her forward. 1. I want to co-produce any new music going forward so I can maintain creative input. 2. I'm done with the fake romance narrative. If Dylan and I collaborate, it's for music, not tabloid headlines. 3. I want final approval on any major image decisions. A hush fell. The marketing executives exchanged glances. Evelyn's jaw tightened momentarily, but she said nothing. Arthur tapped a pen against the table. "That's a lot," he mused. "We typically reserve co-producer roles for artists with extensive track records." Her pulse hammered. She stood her ground. "Then treat it as an exceptional case. If we're pivoting to highlight my authenticity, let's make it real. Otherwise, the audience will see right through another label-manufactured storyline." For a moment, she worried he'd refuse. But then Arthur exhaled, a glint of respect in his eyes. "All right, we'll draw up a renegotiated contract, but I expect you to meet us halfway. No more on-stage surprises without at least giving me a heads up. Deal?" Lena hid a grin of relief. "Deal." Evelyn cleared her throat. "We'll need to act quickly. The press is hungry for your next move. I suggest a short documentary piece or exclusive interview that frames this as a natural evolution in your artistry. Coming home to her true sound." "Something along those lines?" Lena merely nodded, still processing the fact that her rebellion had led to a real shift. She recognized the label would still wrap everything in a neat PR bow, but at least she'd have a voice now. That was worth fighting for. When the meeting ended, Arthur motioned for Lena to stay behind. The others filed out, leaving the two of them in the glass-walled conference room as the sun sank toward the horizon. He walked toward the window, hands in his pockets, surveying the cityscape. "I admit," he said, voice low, "I'm impressed by your courage. I built my career on controlling every variable, but maybe there's more power in letting an artist's genuine spark shine." Standing beside him, Lena studied his reflection in the glass. She remembered her first impression of him, a brilliant, intimidating figure who could make or break her dreams. Now, he seemed more human, still guarded, but capable of acknowledging another path. "I appreciate you giving me this chance," she said softly. "I never meant to sabotage your plans. I needed to hold on to something real." He turned his gaze to her, eyes flicking across her features. In that quiet moment, an unspoken tension lingered. The push and pull of two strong-willed individuals who had once been at odds. "Don't squander it," he finally replied. "You may have more influence here than you realize." There was a warmth in his tone she hadn't heard before. Not overtly romantic, but far from cold professionalism. She sensed a newfound respect, a shift in their dynamic that she couldn't entirely define. Perhaps this was the start of a genuine partnership, no longer bound by illusions or fear. As Arthur left, Lena lingered, staring out at the city lights. She felt both exhausted and exhilarated. The next phase wouldn't be easy. Big labels rarely changed overnight, but the winds had shifted, and the heart that guided her from Austin to LA was still intact. She was, at last, taking confident steps on her own terms, new directions, but the same fierce, unwavering soul. Over the following weeks, Lena's schedule exploded with activity. She collaborated closely with Curtis and other producers on a new EP, an acoustic-driven project called Unveiled, intended as a bridge between her raw sound and the label's commercial instincts. True to her renegotiated terms, she co-produced each track, meticulously weaving her voice into arrangements that felt real. Even as they added subtle pop flourishes, the final say rested with her. She also began a series of workshops at Thorn Music Group, a mix of brand strategy and authenticity seminars for emerging artists. It was Arthur's idea, buoyed by Evelyn's cautious support. They wanted to capitalize on Lena's sudden reputation as the poster child for real artistry. Lena, however, saw these workshops as a chance to help younger musicians avoid the pitfalls she'd faced. On a crisp Tuesday morning, she arrived at a small conference room within Thorn Tower, dressed in jeans and a casual blouse, less flashy than her typical photo shoot attire. A dozen aspiring singers and songwriters, most in their early 20s, filled the chairs. A hush fell as Lena entered. "Welcome, everyone," she said, feeling a strange flutter of nerves. "I'm Lena Morgan. I've learned a lot these past months about balancing authenticity and industry demands. If I can help you find your voice without losing yourself, then it's worth it." She spoke openly about her own journey, the nights singing for spare change, the intimidation of a massive label contract, and the moment she nearly lost her identity. Each story resonated with someone in the room. A young guitarist wearing a worn denim jacket raised her hand. "How did you push back when the label wanted to mold you?" Lena paused. "It wasn't immediate. Early on, I let them shape me more than I should have. But the key is knowing your non-negotiables, what parts of your music and persona you can't sacrifice, no matter what. Once you identify those lines, you learn to defend them." Another artist, a pop singer with bright pink hair, leaned forward. "Were you ever scared you'd blow your one shot if you refused them?" "Terrified," Lena admitted, "but real success means nothing if it kills your passion. And ironically, being truthful on stage is what propelled me forward. Fans sense honesty." As the workshop continued, she realized her role at Thorn Music Group was evolving. She was no longer just a product on their roster. She was a mentor, shaping the next wave of talent. An unexpected warmth filled her. This new influence felt more fulfilling than chasing chart positions alone. Meanwhile, her own EP sessions progressed. Recording with co-producer credit challenged her patience. Curtis sometimes resisted her insistence on acoustic guitar front and center, or her desire to leave a rough vocal take that captured raw emotion. Yet they struck a fragile compromise. She'd let him add light percussion or a subtle synth layer, as long as the heart of the track remained her unvarnished voice. Matteo flew in periodically to contribute his signature guitar lines, which added a soulful undercurrent reminiscent of their Austin days. Each night, Lena fell into bed exhausted, but a good kind of exhausted, fueled by genuine artistry. Dylan, too, began to break away from formulaic pop. Inspired by Lena's stance, he pitched a ballad with deeper lyrics to the label, something they initially balked at. But Arthur sensed a shift in market appetite for authentic pop. Perhaps Dylan's pivot, guided by Lena's example, could tap into that trend. Over coffee in the Sound Factory's lounge, Dylan thanked her. "Seeing you stand up for yourself gave me the push I needed. If the label can't handle my real stuff, maybe it's not the right place." She laughed lightly. "Careful. Now that I'm stepping outside the box, I might be a bad influence on you." He chuckled. "Then keep it up. We need more bad influences around here." Evelyn Reed, once so stern, also showed a softened stance. One afternoon, she caught Lena in the hallway and handed her a folder labeled Press Initiatives. "We want to highlight your mentorship of new artists, Lena Morgan, building a legacy of authenticity. Marketing gold, if you ask me." Lena studied Evelyn's polished features. "Is that how we're spinning it?" "Marketing gold," Evelyn shrugged, tapping manicured nails on the folder. "It can be both genuine and beneficial to the label. Believe it or not, I admire what you're doing, and my job is to craft narratives that resonate. You've given me a strong one." Though the language still felt clinical, Lena sensed genuine respect. Nodding, she accepted the folder. "I'll look it over." Walking away, she felt an odd mixture of pride and caution. The synergy between her personal passion and the label's marketing machine was precarious, but it was working, for now. She'd become living proof that some corners of the industry might be open to real voices, if those voices demanded it loudly enough. One late night, after reviewing mixes with Curtis, Lena stepped into the dimly lit corridor and spotted Arthur by a large window. He stared out at the city lights, arms folded. She approached quietly, remembering their charged conversation after the VMAs. "Long day?" she asked softly. He exhaled, turning to face her. "They all are. But this new approach is paying off. Your brand, your workshops, your upcoming EP. It's stirring positive talk in the industry." She offered a tentative smile. "Never thought I'd hear you say you're proud of me, but it kind of sounds like you are." Arthur's mouth curved slightly. "Pride might be too strong a word. But let's say I'm gratified. We're building something different here. It may shape our future as a label." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, the quiet hum of overhead lights and distant studio noise their only backdrop. It struck her how far they'd come, from a strict contract built on illusions to an evolving partnership fueled by respect. A legacy was indeed forming, step by step, shaped by authenticity and the willingness to defy the usual rules. Before parting, Arthur placed a hand on her shoulder, a gentle, reassuring gesture that told her she wasn't alone in this. Lena felt both hope and an unexpected closeness. The label was changing, and so was she, each forging a new path that just might endure longer than any chart-topping hit. 6 months later, Lena stood in the cozy, minimalist space of an NPR studio, preparing for a tiny desk concert performance, an intimate format that had become famous for stripping down the gloss of big stage acts and revealing their musical core. The producer handed her a cup of tea, and she inhaled the herbal steam, allowing a calm to settle in her chest. This was it. A full-circle moment where her artistry could breathe unfiltered. Arthur Thorne lingered off to the side, arms folded, observing quietly. He wasn't there to dictate her set list or micromanage her look. In fact, he'd come simply to watch, curiosity mingled with pride. Evelyn Reed was absent. No paparazzi lurked. It was just Lena, her band, which now included Matteo and a small, respectful crew. A few members of the press had been invited, but the overall vibe was low-key. No elaborate stage design, no pyrotechnics, just shelves of books and records behind her, a handful of cameras, and a warm, private audience. Dylan would join for one duet song, though their so-called romance was long dispelled. They'd grown into genuine friends, bonded by shared experiences and a mutual desire to break the mold. When the host signaled it was time, Lena stepped up to the small, makeshift platform. Barely enough space for her, Matteo, and the keyboard player. She strummed a chord on her acoustic guitar, felt the tightness in her throat relax, and began her first song, It was an original track from Unveiled, the new EP that had already garnered critical praise for its raw, confessional style. Her voice spilled into the tiny studio, hushed and powerful, reminiscent of the nights she'd poured out her soul in Austin's unremarkable bars. She let each lyric settle, no special effects, no layered production to obscure her message. This was Lena Morgan at her most honest. A camera lens only a few feet away captured every flicker of emotion in her eyes. After the final note, the small audience erupted into applause, not the deafening roar of an arena, but an intimate, heartfelt response. She grinned, unable to mask her gratitude. "Thank you," she said softly, a genuine tremor coloring her voice. "This next piece is called Bare Soul. It's one of the first songs I ever wrote, back when I was 17, scribbling lyrics in my bedroom." Matteo launched into a gentle riff on his electric acoustic guitar. Lena followed, weaving her voice through the delicate melody. The song spoke of heartaches and small joys, of carrying hidden wounds, yet fighting to keep your spirit unbroken. And though she'd performed variations of it before, never had it felt so alive as in that moment, liberated from any marketing constraints. When Dylan entered for the duet portion, the room hushed even more. He sang harmony, their voices dovetailing in a bittersweet refrain that alluded to illusions and second chances. Their eyes met in a shared understanding. They'd both endured the label's demands, faced public scrutiny, and found a surprising camaraderie. By the time they finished, the applause was thunderous in its intensity, despite the modest crowd. Lena bowed her head, tears pricking her eyes. She stepped off the platform, heart swelling with a sense of completion and renewed purpose. The host approached to record a brief interview for the show's outro. "Lena, it's a treat to witness you in such an intimate setting. Your fans have followed your journey from small Austin bars to LA's biggest stages. What do you hope they take away from your music now?" She glanced at Matteo, at Dylan, then at Arthur in the corner, recalling every step that had led her here. "That it's never too late to be true to yourself," she said, voice trembling with emotion. "The industry can push and pull you in different directions, but real artistry is about sharing who you are, flaws and all. If I can do that, if I can give others permission to do that, then it's all worth it." The interview wrapped up. Cheers broke the gentle hush, and Lena let herself savor the moment. In a few weeks, she'd return to the label to plan a tour. There would be new challenges, no doubt, but after everything she'd faced, she no longer feared losing herself. She'd learned how to stand firm, to negotiate, to maintain boundaries. The machine hadn't crushed her soul. It had, in a strange way, given her a larger platform to proclaim it. Arthur approached, offering a measured smile. "This was powerful," he said, choosing his words carefully. "I see why people say you connect on a personal level. You've proven me wrong in some ways." She studied him, sensing something like genuine admiration. "I never wanted to undermine you," she responded quietly. "I just wanted to sing the truth." He nodded. "And that truth has become an asset, not a liability. Congratulations, Lena. You've carved out a place here on your own terms." As he stepped aside, Matteo threw an arm around her shoulders, and Dylan joined them, grinning. They lingered in the small NPR studio, exchanging excited chatter with the crew. Lena couldn't stop smiling, heart buoyed by the knowledge that, after all the turmoil, she was finally standing where she belonged, on a stage, no matter how big or small, where her voice was entirely her own. The day ended in a swirl of gratitude. She spotted a text from Chloe, watched the live stream, crying my eyes out. So proud. And one from a new friend at the label who wrote, "Keep inspiring us." Tucking her phone away, Lena gazed at the modest stage, the library shelves, the warm faces around her. This, she realized, was not just an ending, but a beginning. She was forging a legacy grounded in courage and authenticity, living proof that a dream could be reshaped without losing its essence. And in that small, crowded studio, Lena Morgan felt something she'd long yearned for, a deep, unwavering certainty that she was finally, truly home. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.